Before we continue, Deputy Morell, you have a correction that you wish to make of something that you said before the Assembly?
That's correct, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity. I have two corrections that I'd like to make from statements I made on Monday. The first, sir, was in regard to a statement in a speech about propositions lodged by, or amendments lodged by the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I believe in one of them I said that I believe that one of the Amendment 28 had been lodged by Deputy Scott in her name. Looking back, that wasn't the case. It was lodged by the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, so I'd like to make that correction, please, sir. And the second one is on an entirely different matter. On Monday, in Questions Without Notice, I was asked whether I had been made aware of freight price rises by Condor Ferries. At the time, sir, I said that I hadn't, and that was because I had received a letter and regarding freight price rises, but in the moment had thought that that letter was about passenger price rises. That letter wasn't, it was about freight price rises, and they had sent that letter on, I believe, the 16th of November, sir. So I would like to correct that for the public record, that I had been made aware, and I had responded to that letter as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Very well, we continue now with the debate on the 20th Amendment. And next to speak is Deputy Renouf.
Beg your pardon. So I indicated in the chat that I wished to speak before the end of the debate, but I didn't wish to speak at that particular moment.
The note I have, sorry, Deputy, I may have been in translation. Well, you said the note I had was Deputy Renouf would like to speak, but ideally after lunch, as he'll be in the chamber. That was the note I got.
Yes, so that is an abbreviation of the longer note that I sent, which was which said that I did wish to speak, and I simply wanted to make sure that I didn't miss speaking if the debate closed before lunch. However, I mean, I can try and do so. It's just I've sat down, having cycled in. I haven't got my computer ready yet. I'm happy to try and do so if nobody else wishes to speak.
Well, does anyone? I will take you after the next speaker to give you a chance to catch your breath in the circumstances, Deputy Renouf. But does any other member wish to speak?
So, just very briefly, on the matters that I just mentioned, I would also like to apologise to States members for having made those mistakes, and obviously for any inconvenience caused to anybody outside the Assembly as well. Thank you, sir.
Well, does any other member wish to speak on this debate? Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I look around the chamber and I look at individuals and I see specialisms, I see specialist subjects that States members specialise in. And I wouldn't be so bold as to tell people that I have specialist subjects myself, but over my career I've run my own businesses, and I feel that if I have an interest, it could well be in economic development and the economy. And I've always, sir, over the years, agreed with the famous phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." And as I say, for many years I've thought that. And quite recently, I suppose in the last couple of years, thinking about manifestos for recent elections, I thought hard on that subject and came to the conclusion that economies can't work without people in them. And those people in economies need to be educated. And in order to educate them, we need teachers and we need an education department. And so I just say this, I know many teachers, and the ones I know get up early in the morning, go off to work quite often before I do. They get home late at night, they spend their weekends working, they spend their weeks trying to find time to teach their children, to mark the work they need to mark and to plan ahead. And I think it's clear to me, sir, that teachers very obviously go above and beyond what their contract might say. However, sir, there's a but in this, as you may well know. It's a bit like bringing planning applications to the States Assembly. We elect a planning committee in this assembly and trust in them to go off and do their job properly. And for me, sir, we elect a States Employment Board to go out and negotiate with various people on our behalf. And I want teachers to be paid properly. I don't want them to feel that they're being taken advantage of. The amount of work they do outside of hours is very clear to me, and I want them to be properly rewarded for that. But I don't feel that negotiating the way we are in the States Assembly today is the right way forward. And all I would say in closing is that both sides need to come back to the table, and both sides need to try that a little bit harder to get this over the line. I know teachers who are bitterly disappointed they're not back teaching. I know teachers who want to stick it out for a better deal. There must be a way forward here, and I appeal to both sides to start talking and working together. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Redden.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Assembly for their patience. Sir, I am friends with teachers, and I know teachers, and it is therefore quite hard to make this speech because I know that they will be disappointed in what I have to say. I respect enormously the work that teachers do. I know my sons who are at Le Kenové and Holia are being taught by exceptionally good teachers. I myself was able to benefit from teaching of exceptional quality at Le Moy, Le Kenové and Holia. And I'm lucky enough, having come back to the island, to being able to find one or two of the teachers who taught me and actually be able to tell them how grateful I am for their work in teaching me. And that is something you kind of forget to do when you're a callow 18-year-old. So I'm glad to have had that opportunity. But we have to consider here where we are. And the situation we're in is that the teachers have been offered a series of offers, all of which have attempted to find within the envelope available to the SEP a reasonable offer, and it has been incrementally improved. And the thing that hasn't yet been pointed out, I think, that needs to be pointed out, is that there are other elements to take into account, not just the pay offer from the States Employment Board. In terms of what this government has done, we have increased tax allowances above inflation. We have increased child allowances. We have increased allowances for childcare allowances. And these things are also part of what this government has done for the teaching profession. And I think we should also bear in mind the pension situation. The pensions contribution from the employer for teachers is, I think, 16%. And teachers pay 6%, I think, into that pension scheme. It is, as I understand it, a very good scheme. And it may be considered not particularly relevant, but I would say it is in the context of all the discussions that we've been having about, for example, retention within the industry and so on. I mean, I was in a vaguely similar situation when I worked for the BBC, a quasi-public sector organisation. We had a relatively generous pension scheme. It happened to be closed down partly when I was there. But it factored, when I considered, as I did several times in my career, leaving the BBC to work in the private sector, because we were all aware, working for the BBC, that we were working for 20 to 40% less than producers doing the same job in the private sector. You factored many things into that. One of the things, of course, was the pride of working for the BBC, but there was also the fact that whilst your salary was lower, the salary that you earned in the private sector you had to buy a pension. And that would be an expensive business. And so that was a factor when you considered whether or not to leave the public service or not. So I do think that we should also consider in this the teachers' pension arrangements, which offer an additional part of their remuneration package, and a significant one. And as I say, also those additional things, tax measures and other measures and so on, which the government has done. So I think what we come down to in the end is a situation where there is no doubt that we would like to pay teachers more. Who wouldn't? We'd probably like to pay nurses more as well, and so on. The question is, what can be reasonably afforded? And governments have to take that view. The unions, it seems to me, have decided to make this the year when an attempt is made to claw back losses over many years periods. And I guess that's their right to do that. But it is also the right of the government and this assembly to take account of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture was very eloquently explained by Deputy Miller in terms of what has been offered to other public sector workers and the extraordinary lengths, I think, which the States Employment Board has gone to meet these, to meet the teachers at least halfway. And I find it quite telling that the union does not want to engage in binding arbitration. Deputy Barbara Ward was perplexed by that. I remember reading something at the time when that last came up, which said that the union commented that they didn't want to do that because of the experience in Guernsey, where the union did accept binding arbitration and didn't get what it wanted. I found that quite telling. I mean, yes, binding arbitration may not give you what you want. It may not. That's the nature of arbitration. The employer is prepared to take the risk. The union is not. And I think that's a huge shame. So I think there is, at the moment, a very generous offer. Actually, I think in terms of the multi-year nature of the offer, if I had been the union in the room, I would have bitten the hand off of the employer, given what we know about potential inflations, or as much as we can say about potential inflation in the future. Of course it's a risk. There are no guarantees, but it is a very generous offer. And it is a huge shame that of the two things that are available, I think it's about the third improvement in the offer now, third improved offer, or binding arbitration, the union is not prepared to accept either and wants to go for broke. And I think it's not a surprise to me that the union voted not to accept the offer in a way because of this debate coming up. There was perhaps the hope that the Assembly would step in. I think it is more likely, I hope, that the Assembly will reject that. And I agree to some extent with members of Reform Jersey who says this Assembly could bring this to a close. I think it could bring this to a close by making it clear that there is no extra money. There is, to hold out anything else is false hope. And I think the view that I hope will be taken in this Assembly is the view that I think is shared more widely amongst the public, which is, yes, we'd love to give more pay to the teachers, but we have to bear in mind the wider context. We have to bear in mind the fact that already there have been several improvements in the offer, and we have to bear in mind that the employer has gone the extra mile with offering binding arbitration. And given all those things, and taken in the round, I think that would suggest that we should reject this suggestion, accept that the offer is a good one in the circumstances, not perfect, a good one, and that we should move on that basis. So I ask the Assembly to reject the amendment and support the States Employment Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to? Deputy Felton.
Thank you, sir. I thought it was important that I speak after the previous speaker because there were some comments made about the union and the reflections of the speaker on the actions of the union. Having been a union leader myself for the civil servants, I know all too well that unions are member-led. Anything put forward from the States Employment Board, there would have been decisions taken by members, there would have been votes taken by members. So people who are sitting in this assembly today saying teachers won't leave, we're not putting our schools at risk by rejecting this amendment. I think they should be reminded that it is union members, the teachers themselves, that have been rejecting these offers. It's them that are saying these offers aren't good enough. And it's them that are the skilled people that can get jobs, let's face it, anywhere in the world, that we should be fighting to retain, because it's them that are training our workforces in the future. And if we think about how the impact of the strikes and the inconvenience that it's caused actually proves how important our teachers are, how much they are valued within our society. And I'm not just talking about how people might value them as free childminders, because they're very much more than that. This is more than where your children happen to be during the day while you're at work. This is about providing a good, well-rounded and quality education for the families living on the island. We know that we're losing people. We know that we're losing skilled people, and we know that our young people are not returning to the island, or those that do return leave. Now, one of the things that you're likely to consider if you're a working professional, maybe somebody in the finance industry, when you're considering where you might want to work and live, might well be the education provisions that are there for your children. So it's incredibly important that we have a skilled workforce of professional educators. Coming back to the negotiations, it's been said many times during the past year by members of the SEB and the Chief Minister that all other pay groups have accepted previous offers. Now, that may be true. They've also said that they've also referenced teaching assistants. However, teaching assistants are part of quite a different pay group. Due to decisions having been made in the past, teaching assistants are in a very broad pay group called civil service. That pay group includes all of the people that work in the offices, the people that we might see in and out of Broad Street, the people that may well see more flexible working as being something that they're willing to have as a benefit that might be why they might accept a pay offer that potentially somebody working in a school wouldn't, because they don't actually have the ability to have the types of flexible working arrangements that might be available to people working in offices. So I would suggest that had teaching assistants been balloted separately in their own pay negotiation, perhaps we might have seen a different result in relation to teaching assistants. Perhaps that's something that the SEB should look at as to how they realign pay groups into the future so that they're aligned within certain kind of job families. But I do think that the assertion that teaching assistants have been happy to accept this offer could well be ill-founded, because we actually don't know that. I'm going to leave it there because the principles of my party have been well put by my party colleagues, and I'm conscious to keep this short. But I do want people to remember that when you use the faceless word, the union, there are many faces behind that word. And those faces are the working people that form part of that union. It's not just somebody coming in from the UK making decisions. It's people representing the workers, representing the taxpayers at the end of the day, and representing our employees. Thank you.
Another member wishes to speak on the amendment. No other member wishes to... Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I think one of the things that's disappointing about this debate is firstly the lack of humility that comes from members of government when they talk about this, and I don't think we saw any of that from the Environment Minister when he spoke before, about a fact that few seem to be prepared to say, which is that the offer that has been made to teachers is a pay cut. It's a real terms pay cut. I don't believe anybody ought to be guilt-tripped into feeling grateful for seeing their economic standard of living reduce. And I don't think it's any consolation to them to hear members of government explain, why this is so necessary given the bigger picture, when there are some pretty nasty things in that bigger picture when it comes to priorities of government spending elsewhere. We can see, not just this government or this Assembly, but over the last 10 years, we've spent over £100 million to not get a new hospital. I think teachers are absolutely within their rights to feel angry at seeing such a massive waste of spending in public money, and then told, by the way, there's no money to ensure that your standard of living doesn't get worse. And not only for this year, but for all the years that came before, where they've had real terms cuts to their salaries. And so the question then has to be asked, when does this end? Does that trend of real-term pay cuts for teachers carry on forever? And if it does, we know where that leads. It leads to oblivion, because you will have no teaching profession if that's the way we go, and we'll have no education system in Jersey. We'll then have no economy, and I'm sure lots of people will want to leave at that point. So at some point, something's got to change, and we have to invest in our education system and those who work in that system to ensure its future survival. The government has offered RPI pay increases in future years. I find that just lacks so much credibility when we don't know what the economic situation will be like in those years. And if I remember rightly, I think one of those years isn't even in this term of office. So future governments, of course, can do whatever they like there. So I don't blame anyone for not wanting to have faith in that kind of offer. But even if it were to happen, it still would lead over several years to no real improvement in teachers' economic standard of living from where they were in years gone by. It actually means flatlining for a few years, and they're telling us that the problem isn't RPI costs this year or next year or the year after. The problem is the years that got us to this point where their salaries in real terms have gone down. So it's about fixing years of underinvestment in our workforce in the teaching profession. So I think Deputy Balash used a very interesting phrase in this when he spoke very highly of teachers, expressed his appreciation of them and the work they do, including going beyond what their contracts say, and he spoke of the privilege that they have in being able to help shape the minds of our young people, words that I hope everybody agrees with. But he spoke about wanting to address this issue, and I made a note of this, whereas he called it in a civilised atmosphere, which I find a very interesting phrase, because that civilised atmosphere, civilisation in this context, means a pay cut. How very civilised, we're going to cut your pay, but don't worry, it's civilised. Struggling to afford a roof above your head, losing hope of ever buying a home of your own, struggling with inflationary rent increases, don't worry, we're doing this in a civilised way. I think that shows that shows signs of just being out of touch for what people's real lives are actually like. It's not about the language we use, it's about people's material conditions, and you can tell people, be grateful, you're lucky for what you got as much as you like, but if they feel their earnings having less and less value as each year goes on, there's no amount of words you can offer them to make up for that. The only thing you can offer to make up for that is more money. So Deputy Luce said in his speech that we shouldn't be negotiating in this assembly. He's completely right, of course, we shouldn't do that. And I, as a staunch trade unionist, wouldn't want to do that in this assembly. I want to leave it to the teachers' unions and the teachers' unions members themselves to decide ultimately what they will accept, and they'll have my support for that as a trade unionist and as a Democrat. This assembly shouldn't be negotiating. But that's not what this proposition does. This proposition itself, or this amendment rather, doesn't impose a new pay offer for the teachers. It simply frees up money so a more meaningful negotiation can take place. So some members spoke before about their perplexion at the teachers not accepting the offer of binding arbitration. But if you say there's no more money, but you should have binding arbitration, well, of course they're not going to have faith in that process, because you've already decided what the outcome is before they go into the room for that by saying there's no more money. Well, if there's no more money, then there ain't going to be a better offer. So that simply makes no sense, and I don't blame anyone for not wanting to take part in such a process. So in this amendment to free up funding for education will enable the government to get round a table with those union representatives and thrash out some new negotiation, new offer, hopefully, one which will be more palatable for that part of our workforce and make them feel like, to at least some degree, the concerns that they've been expressing to us have been listened to, and they can have faith that there is a bit more security for their profession, for what they do for the young people of Jersey. And who knows what their position at the end of that will be, but it will certainly, I think, be a better process if we can provide funding to enable that to happen, and I'll certainly respect whatever they choose to do as a result of that. But so if the amendment is to be defeated, I want to hear from ministers, and I'll make this point: we haven't heard from the Education Minister. This is an extremely important subject, and we want to know what they think. When I was Assistant Education Minister, I defied the lines of the government at the time so I could support our teachers, because I had listened to them and understood how important they thought it was to get a decent pay offer at that time. I will say I attended marches with the person who's now Chief Minister, whose position has changed on that, but mine certainly hasn't. So I think we do need to hear from that, because if the answer is not to be an improved pay offer for teachers now, to try to undo some of the harm that has been done to the effective value of their salaries over recent years, they then need to provide an answer as to what the alternative is. Because if the alternative is pay freezers, real terms pay freezers for the next few years, which is what they're indicating it will be, then that will not solve the problem, because it will still see, that flatlining will see no improvement in the conditions that the teachers are telling us need to be improved because of the years of underinvestment up until that point. So I think the language that ought to be used from this point should be about real terms pay cuts and not hide it in any other term, because that's what we're talking about. So I wouldn't think badly of anyone for wanting to say no to a real terms pay cut, and I think we ought to respect the teachers a lot more than just giving them measly words that don't pay the bills.
Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And I too want to ask that the Education Minister and her assistant ministers, as we have, do actually come and talk to us about why their position is as it is. Because certainly, very simplistically, if I were running a department and I got £2 million extra, I'd say thank you. Yeah. That was going to help us provide a proper education system, a service for our people. Let's see that. And why would you turn that down? Why you might turn it down is because this government, this set of ministers, are in favour of a small government. They want the public sector to be as small as possible. and let the market run. That's the philosophy behind most of the people in this room. And certainly, this is an example of exactly that. Small government, we don't like government, we don't like. And free market. And the offers that have been made, as my predecessor, my chairman, leader said, was that what we've got here is a real terms pay cut. 2024, 8% consolidated. 25, a guarantee of September RPI. 2026, a guarantee of September RPI, consolidated. Does that in any way meet what the teachers are saying, the members of the union are saying? We want to finally have a proper pay rise so that we don't feel, as we do, that our money goes less and less far because of inflation, because of the cuts. And then finally, a one-off payment of £1,000, unconsolidated, so it drops out after 1 year. 1 year you get it, you can spend it in that year if you wish, but then it drops off your wages. You're back on your heads, as it were. Alternatively, perhaps we might return to the gain share process, which has taken place in the previous ministerial government and appears to be identically applied now, which says, take your school budget, you can have a pay rise, all you teachers, but it must come out of the school budget, the overall budget. So basically, you get a pay rise at the expense of the quality of teaching that goes on in your school. So you sacrifice something in order that you have a pay rise, gain share. And that, as I say it, that's a disgusting way to divide a budget. That's a disgusting way to provide an education service, which inevitably is built on the backs of you teachers taking a pay cut. Alternatively, you might want to go into, and I believe that's on offer, discussion of your terms and conditions in general, rather than just pay. And you discuss and debate, well, if I get this benefit, then that helps me put up with a pay cut. And I have some experience of negotiating sort of terms and conditions on top or alongside a pay award. And the experience comes from my wife. And for example, it's an example that she often quotes at me, one change to alleviate the difficulties and the problems of being a teacher is to take your terms and conditions and improve them. For example, putting a limit on the number of meetings you have after school to discuss endlessly educational issues or practical matters, put a cap on that. So instead of every week, a weekly staff meeting, which does happen in some schools, it goes to no more than 2 meetings a term, where your time is given for a couple of hours between 4 and 6, having a meeting about policy or about what's effective. And she was quite pleased, having signed a contract or an agreement that said, yes, we will remove this, along with other things to make the burden of teaching lighter on you. The reality was that within a year, those heads who had previously having weekly meetings after school were back having meetings after school. Did anyone enforce that? No. Did anybody enforce it in a small school? Can you challenge your head teacher and say you shouldn't be doing this? It's quite a difficult task, especially when you're small numbers in a primary school. Secondary, it's perhaps a bit easier, but certainly in primary, you're directly confronting the head who makes most of the decision, including whether you're employed or not. And going and arguing the toss about your terms and conditions and saying you're breaking the rules is a difficult thing to do and doesn't always happen, especially when teachers are so reasonable. Time and time again, we'll go that extra mile, we'll do that extra duty and not argue about it because they are reasonable people. And that is a normal way in which they approach pay awards, as reasonable people, which in turn is why they've seen their pay cut over the years, because they're so flipping reasonable. That's how it happens. So I'm afraid I've been here before. I think it was 2019, I brought a proposition to the States to pay teachers more. It failed then. I don't know if it's going to fail now, but certainly it should. It's about time we broke this cycle which says teachers will do the job for a pay cut. That shouldn't be happening. We should be paying proper respect to our teachers, along with our nurses and our bin men over the COVID outbreak and what happened there. We should be valuing them. This is the way to say, and we value you. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to? Yes, Conatable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. For the benefit of those who do not know, I'm neither a member of Reform nor a member of the government. I speak as an impartial member of this assembly who is, yes, somewhat distressed to hear the dispute has got thus far. And I ally myself to the comments made by Deputy Luce that we have a States Employment Board who are charged with negotiating the fairest deal available for the teaching profession. And I do not dispute some of the claims made that they've suffered a drop in standards over the years, and that is something which probably needs to be addressed. But it so happens that over lunch I came across two friends of mine. They brought up the subject, and as to, yes, that they are just two members of the public, and there'll be as many views as there are members of the public. But their view was, yes, they were sympathetic to many of the claims, but felt that it was unreasonable to expect all that to be given in one lump, in one go. And one of the gentlemen I was speaking to said that he himself had been party to a arbitration proceeding some years ago, and maintained that, in fact, the arbitration result gave him and his union more than they're actually asking for. Which brings me on to the point made by Deputy Messick, and I apologise if I misunderstood this. I don't believe the arbitration process limits the amount awarded to that which is the final offer from SEB at the present time. If arbitration were to go above that and recommend and say, in fact, that yes, you have been deprived of cost of index rises for so long, we believe an increase of X is appropriate, then I would expect them to say so, and further I would expect government to produce the funds to produce it. In fact, they would be obliged to do so because they would give them an unconditional commitment. So all that leads me to the conclusion is that as sympathetic as members of the public are to the teacher situation, and we all are, why is it that the union will not submit to arbitration which could give them a better deal than that is now on the table? And with that, sir, I conclude my comments.
Thank you very much, Conatable. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'll ask members to... Can we restart the timer, please? It's one of the most difficult speeches that I probably made and going to make in the Assembly. Deputy Ward talked about feelings. I'm really, really, really upset. This is where I am as an education minister. I can't go with this. I have 4 different unions representing employees, my employees, in each and every school. It's a community, and the community has been disturbed. It's not good atmosphere, and it's right. I look at the unions. When I met with unions, they mentioned 4 very specific items that they wanted to raise with me: recruitment, retention, workload, well-being, and morale. And it's really, really, really difficult. Emotionally, there's lots of speeches implied that we're heartless, we are not value teachers. I don't think that I ever said it in any of my speeches, because I personally think that without teachers who educate and inspire our children, my child, their work and dedication is enormous. So it's emotionally really, really, really difficult. Now, where we are, and this is very difficult even more, because we have emotions, but we're also debating budget. How we connect our emotions to the facts. And it's tough for everyone. I'm sure that everyone feels the same at this assembly. If any member can reflect where they're emotional and where they're at and how it's turning around, this is probably happening to each and one of us, because I don't believe any member of the assembly don't respect teachers and not value teachers. Saying this, as everyone knows, the SCB is responsible for pay with the states, and of course, I taken interest and liaised with SCB and worked with SCB. We are facing strike 3 days, and as a Minister for Children Education and a mother, deeply concerned of impact on children and families faced throughout this year or through action short of strike and strike actions. Our tendency policy telling that every day matters, that's what we're expecting from parents. Therefore, every day missed because of the industrial action will be harming children education. But this is the facts. I cannot tell something different about it. Now, as the Vice Chair of SCB said, that this is the offer. We all know the offer. I'll not go back to the offer. You can read. And they said that other groups will not be getting the same. Let us think about it. And this is, I'm looking not across the government. I'm Minister in charge of the department, children, education, young people, and skills. We employ many different groups. We have nurses at CAMS. I have nurses in CAMS. We have psychiatrists. We have educational psychologists. We have social workers in children's services. And it has been mentioned other pay group, but if you're talking about the pay groups that within the SIPs, I have 4 different unions that don't work together, don't coordinate together. And if we're saying that from 2,744 employees that I have within my department, only one group would receive 17.6 demand for 2024, and others not. What's the message I'm saying for others? 17.6 spread over 3 years. What's the message I'm sending to all my other employees as a minister? Because I'm the minister for whole department for 2,744 employees. Now, recently when I spoke with, I had met with NEU, and I was a bit disappointed that it took them 3 months to respond to me, and we had finally a meeting, and when they raised with me recruitment and retention, And I would like the members, please listen, and the public listen, because there is a narrative that likely be driven or from the past or from the UK. So let's start with recruitment. I would like to go back and to repeat what the Vice Chair of SCB said. I don't have a single vacancy at primary schools. I had more than 30 when I was elected a year ago. I didn't have a single vacancy for September. I don't have a single vacancy now going into the spring terms in the primary schools. I do have single, and I'm talking about 8 vacancies at secondary schools. So if I'm looking at 917 teachers that employed, I'm talking about less than 1.5% vacancy. If I would have the same numbers of vacancies within the social work, children's services, again, I know that it's difficult, but about the particular part, recruitment, we are recruiting. And I think that also we are not having qualified teachers. We do have qualified teachers, but the quality of these teachers, I think it's a bit insulting to the teachers who are teaching. I think we do have qualified teachers, and all of them pass through the interview, and they have been recruited, and they're working. By the way, I have received an update because the agency that has been mentioned, it was 8. To be honest, up to date, we have only 5 left on the island because 3 agencies covered for parental leave. And the agency contract finished, and I would have 5 on the island. Again, this agency is important that we would deliver specialists. And we do have difficulty in recruitment. I've checked where the agency coming from. I have 2 maths, design, and construction, I think. Now, parental leave. I'm fully supporting of the parental leave policy. I voted for this. What's happened with the parental leave, and this is my conversation with the unions last time was, I think, on the square, that it was last year, it was first year the parental leave ran. What's happened? Teachers were taking part-term and taking right leave, the parental leave. So we found ourselves, and head teachers found out themselves, that have 3 or more teachers on leave at the same time. So we needed to recruit. So we created a new policy, and people are taking parental leaves when they need. So up to today, with all what I don't have in recruitment, I had 108 teachers on parental leave from January 23 till 11th of November 23. 108 that we needed to find the cover. We found it. An average, depends on the months, I had between 23 to 53 teachers on parental leave, which well deserved, but it means that we found the cover and we paid for the cover. And we found the specialist teachers, and we did employ 5 agencies to cover the parental leave, but I think it's important to say. Now, so I think I finished the first point about the recruitment. Second, retention. In the past 12 months, from December 22, 1st of December 22, to November the 30th this year, 34 teachers have left the organization. Some of these will have been retired, some of them moved to other school, and some of them left the island and profession. 34 out of 917 vacancies. Again, it might be different in the UK. I completely appreciate that loss of one teacher in school having a huge impact, and when more than one teacher leaves has a huge impact. And it's challenging to the head teachers, and it's challenging for all staff that need to cover. But we do have gaps. And to be honest, if I'm looking at attrition rates, and maybe this is where it's coming from, I don't know, I'm trying to find where the narrative coming. In 2020, when the Deputy Magic was also the Assistant Minister, we have 9.2% attrition rate. We have higher percentage. This year we had 3.7%, and I think any organization knows how does it work. So the first 2 points that raised by UK reps in negotiation didn't meet actually reality check about recruitment and retention. Where I do agree with unions, and I do agree with Deputy Catherine Curtis, because she lodged this amendment with good intention to find a way forward. And in her open speech, sir, she mentioned inclusion and extra responsibilities of teachers and recognition for extra responsibilities and extra burden for the teachers. And I completely recognize this. This is why we have currently, and this is also Deputy Faust mentioned, we have currently a review for the terms and conditions. It was last year review for the emergency services, and we did have some idea. The review of the terms and conditions are extremely important, and follow Deputy Feltham point about teaching assistants. I do believe they are in the wrong unions. I believe that we need to work different in the teaching assistants, and this is the reason that I do have 3, at least on the table, different terms and conditions review. One for the head teachers, one for the teaching assistants, which are progressing very well, and there is a terms and conditions review for the teachers. What does it mean? If I'm telling terms and conditions, what is in your mind? What we are reviewing? Think about it. We have 5 work streams, and I will not give you 2 pages of the terms of reference. First work stream, core hours of work, workload, and inset days. Second, supplementary allowance points. Third, notice period, workforce stability, mobility, flexibility. Fourth, pay and remuneration. And fifth, CPD, professional development, career paths for early career teachers, and also re-employment after retirement. All this has been discussed with unions and led by the officers allocated. This is what's important. And if you go with terms and conditions review, which we are committed to do, I'm personally committed to do, because I do believe current education demand on teachers is different compared to what it was years ago, and the terms of conditions review would help. The outcome of this review as well will likely require more funds, and we will need to fund them once we will know how much will be required, as previous minister when we found the funds to meet the deficit. And unfortunately, and I really appreciate, I would like to have 2 million, but the problem is, from my conversation with unions, it's very clear that the demand of 15.4% last year, or 17.6% this year, this is the demand, and 2 million will not sort out this demand. It's not enough. It's something that will maybe put a plaster, and we would have more strikes going forward, because it will not. I wish it would, but when unions were sitting with me, and I'm looking at them, because when we're sitting in November, and I explained, by the way, the head teachers was raised here. The head teachers have received 7.9 consolidated. They didn't receive more, and they have received between 2,000 to 3,000 from October 23 to October 24, on extra 10 to 15 days out of terms time, to allow terms and conditions review to be completed, to update their pay as an outcome of the terms and conditions review. So and this is the conversation was with unions, said, can you find something to support us? I have found actually 1,100,000 from education budget to give extra 1,000, to make sure that we have enough time to terms and conditions review, but I cannot continue with terms and conditions review when we are on strikes. So it's something that where the real change would come and will address the concern of the workload, it's through terms and conditions review that we are ready to do. It will not be addressed through something else. Now, just a small, it's about the Alex Curtis, he's not here, it's about where the money coming from. I visited 30 schools since coming into the office, and it was clear for me that schools highly rely on IT systems. Our IT systems in schools are really, really poor. We need high upgrade to the IT system, but this is for the members' consideration. And I want to finish by stressing my support to all teachers that are doing a fantastic job. And now people say, oh, it's empty word. It's not empty word. I really, 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 from bottom of my heart, think that they're incredible. And it's not, we are not talking about the teachers. We're talking about how we make the teaching, the school community back. Because what we really want, the whole pay groups that we do have within the schools, within the SIPs, will come together and we will find a way forward. And this is why it's so important that all pay groups going through the pay conditions at the same time, that we will be able to address concerns of the workload, pay, of extra demands. And of course, I want to end the dispute and the impact. So binding arbitration is with the CB. I would really urge unions to come back to reconsider, and we can progress with the terms and conditions that could address the major concern around the workload and overwhelm and the well-being of the teachers. And I think morale, we're all responsible for this. All of us, all states members, all teaching communities, and unions, and government, and SCB. I cannot tell that it's only one bad guy in this. We all need to get together and to try to find a way forward. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. There have been many excellent speeches, but as chair of the States Employment Board, I did feel it important to contribute briefly, although I will truncate my speech. I'm grateful to all who've spoken so far. And yes, I have in the past marched with teachers. I've stood on the platform in the Royal Square and spoken with teachers. More recently, I've tried to do the same. However, I found that I was heckled and shouted down during that time, which was quite a disappointing experience for me. Because I did march with them during the last government, I didn't feel that teachers were properly listened to or engaged with during that period of government. The unions met more regularly with the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel than they did with the previous SEB, and this is exactly why this States Employment Board has taken it upon themselves to meet with all unions on a regular basis, to listen to them, to take on particular pieces of work that each of the unions finds important to their members, because we are prepared to listen to their members and to act upon that, which is why, as Deputy Gardner just set out, we are dealing with the terms and conditions. We have excellent feedback on the progress that is being made. We also have, through our recruitment and retention work, helped to deliver more permanent members of staff in all of our critical services. That's more nurses, fewer agency staff, over 50 teaching assistants, improved access to accommodation, and so much more, because we care about all of our public sector employees, and we want to do our best, and we want to work with them to do that, which is why teachers have been offered a fair pay increase for 2023, along with the rest of the public service. But we've gone better with the help from the Education Minister by offering a £1,000 non-consolidated lump sum to teachers. And I hope that that shows the importance that we place upon their roles. They are, as Deputy Balash was saying, leaders for our children to receive the very best education that we as an island want to deliver for them. And I know some union leaders also agree with me, that this island has the opportunity and the ability to deliver a world-leading education. That should be what we're focused on. But we also have to offer the very best of services that we can in all areas. So, I think the frustration with ongoing strikes and industrial action is felt by many people. Indeed, I attended briefly the Chamber of Commerce lunch today, where they'd been conducting a survey on a number of different matters, and the majority of their members surveyed wanted to see teachers getting back to their classrooms and carrying on with their work. We, as Deputy Rob Ward stated, gaps in education do impact upon each child's access to education and their development. And so any further gaps will erode that progress by creating further gaps in the ongoing curriculum and their access to it. So we need to focus on moving forwards, but we do that in the modern context of not simply being teachers who have experienced erosion in real terms pay, but since 2008, if members and anybody else, who I'm sure they're aware of this, acknowledge, since 2008 there has been a decline in average earnings across the board. This is something, and particularly in these difficult economic times, that we need to address. We need to address that as a community, which means standing up and helping to bring down inflation, acknowledging the fact that we're all experiencing a different quality of life, and we all want to see an improvement of that. But that will take time. It takes collective action, it takes careful husbandry of our public finances, it takes care and of everybody in our community. But in doing so, and I think we can do so, in doing so, we can deliver a continued strong set of balanced books, which we should be proud to be able to deliver. And we can build upon the path that we have, as Deputy Renouf reminded us, of supporting families through income tax allowances, through childcare allowances, and all the other good things that we have done to support members of our community, to support families, and to ensure, as an assembly, that we support islanders and create a community where everyone can thrive.
Deputy Farnham.
Thank you, sir. We have got into a bit of a mess with this, but we never stop learning in politics, and I've been in politics a long time, longer than most in here, and never stop learning, and you tend to learn and things tend to evolve. And one of the mistakes I think we make is we don't allow our thinking to evolve with the real world, with the hard challenges faced in the real world. We tend to stick to doing what we've always done for longer than we should. We've got to be a bit more, I think, more agile on our feet, sir. And being on the backbenches and not being in the government for the first time since I was elected on an island-wide mandate in 2011 has been a bit of a revelation, so it enabled me to look at things from a different perspective. And I think that's a positive thing. Some of the existing ministers should try the same thing. I'm not suggesting they move immediately to the backbenches, sir, but I think it allowed me to look at things through a different perspective. And although when I was in previous governments, I tended to focus on economic matters, which of course are important insofar as they drive the world, but generally the economy drives the world, ultimately the well-being of everything that we do over here. But I think where we've got into a bit of a mess now, because we haven't evolved, or we haven't evolved our thinking, is on the financial prioritisation of our spending. And when we look at the government plan, we are going to be asked to approve a government plan which expends £1.3 billion, which costs islanders £1.3 billion. And not all members may agree, sir, but I think the key to a safe and a stable, a financially secure, more content society revolves around three key areas, and that is health, education, law and order. Following that is, of course, I think, infrastructure and public realm. And those, I think, are the key areas where we need to prioritise funding. And we've got challenges in all of them. We're having challenges with health, and we are saying health is overspending all the time. But the question is, are we providing enough funding for health to achieve what they need to achieve in the modern world, having to deal with all of the new challenges that are faced? The pay pressures also apply to the frontline staff in that area, such as doctors and nurses, and the real people that have to fight for us on the front line. Of course, I think the Health Minister has a far bigger challenge in relation to bringing staff in because of the general shortages of medical professionals, from nurses all the way to specialists. We've seen the challenges the Home Affairs Minister has had with her budget, which could lead to a reduction in police, frontline policing. And that extends to other emergency services. And of course, now we have the challenges with our teachers. And I do declare an interest because my daughter and my son-in-law are both teachers. And I stood with them for a while in the Royal Square at lunchtime. And I know the challenges because I'm told firsthand. And these are challenges that are being experienced by teachers for the first time because we are in different economic circumstances. The previous government, of which I was a part of, wasn't a perfect, and we did have challenges with teaching staff, the teachers, but those challenges and those disagreements were ultimately settled at the time. But we didn't have, like I say, we didn't have to deal with the inflationary pressures, cost of living, and other issues that are prevalent today. So it's no longer, I think, an attractive prospect for people to come into teaching as it was, simply because of the cost of moving to Jersey and living here, and how the salary has not kept pace with the cost of living. But of course, in the real world, it's very difficult for everything in the private or public sector to keep pace with full inflation. And so, as I think the Education Minister alluded to, there are other areas that have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed as a matter of urgency. But this is all, we can't, I think we all agree, every member of this Assembly, I think, holds teaching staff and our other professionals in the highest regard. That is not the debate. And it has sort of de-escalated, or what's the word I'm looking for. It's sunken into that a little bit, that we seem to be critical of teachers, and the rhetoric deployed, I'm afraid, by the government hasn't helped, because they've tried to win the public opinion. They've gone into that now to try and sway public opinion behind the teachers, which I think has been immensely unhelpful, when they should have been looking to go that extra step to try and find a solution. But the problem is, we are trying. We are putting the priority of paying our teaching staff a more realistic salary for what the cost of living over here now, with the so many other financial commitments that I don't think rank as high as health, education, law and order, but have found their way into the headline budgeting of all the other departments. Who'd have thought we'd be spending, is it £40 million on IT? Who'd have thought we'd have been wanting to put £11 million into financial services, notwithstanding the massive return we get for that, Deputy Ozef will remember when we started in the States, before the Financial Services Commission were established, they didn't, when tourism was getting £7 million budget in those days and financial services were getting nothing. And you look across the arm's length organisations and the 40 or 50 million pounds we put in there, and I'm likely to perhaps fall out of favour with some of my friends in the arm's length organisations who all do an excellent job. But you could argue, would our economy, how much would our economy miss some of the work that is done there, how important it is to developing the economy? I think it is probably key, but we just don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is we have lots of things that were considered in the past nice to have. We've made that a core part of our budget and spending now, and we find that we can't touch them because we're concerned about what may happen. So I think the lesson for all of us here is to look at, have a complete restart, press the restart button on how we prioritise financial spending, get our priorities right: health, education, law and order, infrastructure, public realm. Try and rank those and make sure we pay our health staff, our teaching staff and our police officers appropriately, because I think that's the key to a successful economy. And incidentally, so I think one of the ministers said that there were no vacancies in teaching staff at the moment amongst the schools, or very, very low. But I'd like to see a breakdown. I'd like to see if we have a shortage of maths teachers, or science teachers, or language teachers. But I don't know, because I think we're losing the specialised teaching here because we're having to bring in supply teachers and other forms of teachers, but that's perhaps a different work stream. So I would urge the government to go a step further, given the unique circumstances we find ourselves in. The rhetoric, the attempts to move public opinion against the teaching staff is not helpful, sir. And I would urge the unions to do the same and try extra hard on the run-up to Christmas, early in the new year, just to find some middle ground on the understanding that we as an assembly and the government must find a better way of prioritising the essential budgets for the essential staff, for the essential people that keep our island running, sir. I shall be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. I have listened in the morning on the radio to Deputy Miller saying on the teachers' dispute issue that teachers are not a special category to receive a further increase, and we heard a bit earlier the same from Deputy Balash. Nobody negates the contribution of other civil servants categories if we are looking into having fair remuneration for teachers, and each category should be looked at through the length of their own needs and particularities. Each section union and its members are different and able to decide what works for them and what is needed for them. So there is nothing wrong with different offers for different groups, as they are not all the same. On the other hand, other categories of civil servants also benefit of the extra perks to salary that Deputy Renouf has mentioned a bit earlier. I want to have this highlighted. Teachers are a special category of employees, as teaching is the profession that teaches all the other professions. Most of the teachers are putting in double time for the same pay. They put their own money in materials for class, as many are not supplied. They are the ones that every minute of their job are responsible not just for teaching, but for the well-being of the children, so in constant watch. Their learning process never ends, as they have to keep up to date in their subjects. Their jobs almost never end when they get home, as lots of preparation goes into every lesson for next day, next week, or the breakfast, after clubs, shows, trips, and other activities they do on the same money. Then going into work, they have to do the job of 1, 2, 3 people at times, not to mention that many times they act like counselors or cleaners as well, and the list can go on. I want to remind members of when the Chief Minister was supporting increase in pay for civil servants on a similar proposition from Deputy Southern Pete 20 in 2019, worried that if not, our children won't benefit of the right level of education, and I'll quote, "One of the factors that has underpinned the island's success to date has been the good quality, in fact the excellent quality of public services that are available here. May I suggest to any person who doubts what the reaction of private sector taxpayers may be if we support Deputy Southern today, to please consider what might be the reaction of businesses if they lose confidence in our ability to educate the children of their staff. I also understand the statistics that the Education Minister is giving about retention, but many teachers are currently talking about wanting to leave the island as they can't afford it anymore. And we do revert to teachers brought on contracts through agencies as well, which doesn't offer continuity or consistency. To refer to the importance of IT that has been mentioned, no doubt that it has its importance. But as my colleague Deputy Coles highlighted in the quote from Bill Gates, technology is just a tool. Teachers are the most important on getting kids to work together and motivate them. If we can offer over 82,000 per agency teacher to be brought over, why can't we offer the same to local teachers to retain the skills on the island and avoid the necessary rotation of staff, which is breaking the learning process and creates additional costs with training costs? Klaus Moser said, education costs money, but so does ignorance. If we ignore the problem, it's not going to go away. Investing in education now pays off now and later. Treat teachers and pay them right if you want to have ongoing quality learning for well-educated and skilled future generation, and vote for this amendment.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and I call upon Deputy Catherine Curtis to respond.
Thank you, sir. I thank members for their contributions and will address the concerns raised. Firstly, though, ministers and the SEB say they've offered a fair pay deal. They say it's a very generous offer. But they can say this till they're blue in the face. They can use taxpayers' money on full-page adverts in the local newspaper to say so. The fact remains teachers haven't accepted it. 75% of the teachers balloted rejected the latest offer, and it's time to face reality. We've even heard today that the SEB are not up to date with the demands of the unions, as Deputy Miller's speech was based on out-of-date information, which presumably means that the SEB are not being briefed. I couldn't draw any hope from the Deputy's speech, and it did appear defensive and showed an entrenched position. The 15.4% pay rise that was mentioned was an opening position from some time ago. The correct and up-to-date figure is 10.1%. And as for arbitration, teachers haven't wanted to go to arbitration as they've lost all trust in the government, which sets the pay parameters for arbitration. Deputy Barbara Ward also raised concerns about whether payment could be made through the SIPES budget. This has already been done, just recently for head teachers and deputy heads. It was done without any difficulties. Deputy Balash began his speech by stating his support for the teachers, but we need actions, not words. He talked of the difficulties imposed on parents by strikes. This is why we need to sort this problem now, and sadly the SEB have failed to do so. Deputy Luce said that the negotiations should be left to the SEB. I would have agreed with him in the first few months, but not now. This has been going on for such a long time. I really think there will be no progress. If we are going to be responsible, we need to all act on this now and not leave it to the SEB. Unfortunately, if members don't accept this amendment, I can't see this situation improving. The Connétable of St Mary mentioned arbitration. Voting for this amendment would not preclude arbitration. It's just that the extra funds would be in place to provide a larger envelope for education. Deputy Gardner stated that we have to focus on budgets. I'll remind members that we are talking about the sum of 2 million from a budget of 41 million, which would have a huge positive impact on families. Deputy Gardner also gave us details of teacher vacancies to show that there was not a problem with teacher recruitment and retention. But walking out into the Royal Square at lunchtime today, I was confronted by a teacher holding a placard on which was written, "Who will teach your kids when I'm forced to leave?" This teacher was supported by many other teachers, and they can't make their feelings clearer, can they? We need to listen to them. We can offer a review on terms and conditions, which is great, but it doesn't solve the problem right now of pay. The amendment I'm bringing will move 2 million from the modernisation and digital office budget of 41 million to resolve the teacher strikes. The 2 million is calculated on the total teacher wage spend and is accurate and includes matters such as social security payments. Deputy Alex Curtis understandably makes a case to defend modernisation and digital, and I wish him luck with all the improvements that he intends to implement. Members should bear in mind that as well as modernisation and digital spend of 41 million, there is also 20 million spent on IT through capital projects funding. Perhaps some of this crosses over into the M&D budget, but we don't have that information. However, it is a very large amount, and it does seem that this should be more than enough to pay for our modernisation and digital service, including IT. And I don't need to outline the many concerns there are with IT. We will have all heard from islanders and in the media of the many problems and overspends. I'm still not convinced that it's good value for money. 2 million is a very small amount in proportion and will make a huge difference to families as well as our teachers. The SEB has been trying to sort this out for many months, but unsuccessfully, and positions have become entrenched. The teachers have rejected the latest pay offer, and the SEB is not offering more. Now, states members have the opportunity to step in and resolve this issue. Children and parents are being affected now by this ongoing dispute. Let's bring it to an end. I urge members to really think carefully and to vote for this amendment. And I call for the appel.
As called for, I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the 20th amendment. Members have returned to their seats. Then I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been rejected. 13 votes pour, 32 votes contre, no abstentions.
Can we have the count, sir?
Indeed.
Those voting for the Conotop of St Saviour and Deputies Southern, Tadmere, Lehegara, Ward, Alves, Farnham, Mezek, Coles, Porray, Curtis, Feltham, Kovac. Those voting contre, the Conotubs of St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, St Clement, Grouville, St Juan and St Mary, and Deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Ayer, Gardner, Gorst, Moore, Ozef, Balash, Hall, Miles, Scott, Renouf, Binet, both Rose and Tom, Miller, Howell, Ferry, Curtis, Ward, Wilson, Stevenson and Andrews, and Deputy Jones.
Very well. Deputy Miller, I was told that you wish to, sorry. Minister, yes.
Sorry, sir, I've stood into the gap. There has been an ongoing conversation between the Minister for Social Security, who is responsible for the Health Insurance Fund, the Minister for Health, who is responsible for the Health Department, and Deputy Howell about the next amendment. And I'm hopeful that agreement has been reached, understanding the principle of what Deputy Howell wants, which is the vaccinations, in this instance, will be provided by GPs and pharmacists, and therefore will be funded out of the Health Insurance Fund. On that undertaking, I understand that Deputy Howells will withdraw her amendment, and the Minister will withdraw her P88, which would have transferred money from the Health Insurance Fund to the Health Department. So the situation will be, without the amendment and without P88, the vaccinations will be funded from the Health Insurance Fund and provided by GPs and pharmacists. And that, I think, is what has been agreed, and therefore, so I hope that the next amendment is withdrawn, and the Minister for Social Security is withdrawing P88. Thank you,
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Howell, is that...
That's agreeable to me, sir, as long as this can be done as soon as possible.
Well, it's entirely within your gift to draw the amendment, and indeed your own amendment to the amendment, and therefore that is withdrawn.
So yes, I also confirm withdrawal of P88, and while I'm on my feet, I will also confirm the withdrawal of P89, which was the amendment for the Social Security grant, and that will just revert to the normal formula calculation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if it could be done by the end of January?
Well, I'm not sure it's a position that can be debated on the floor of the Chamber, the Assembly. You've withdrawn it, and the Minister has withdrawn P88 and P89. Yes. Very well, in which case the next amendment is amendment number 28, brought by the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I ask the Secretary to read the amendment.
Paragraph 8. After the words set out in Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5.1, the head of expenditure for economic development, tourism, sport and culture should be reduced by 650,000 and the central reserve should be increased by 650,000. In paragraph L, after the words as set out at Appendix 3 to the report, insert the words, except that the revenue expenditure growth item IDFE GP 24001, implementation of digital visitor economy and elite sports strategies, identified in Appendix 3 supplementary financial table, should be reduced by 650,000 for each year, with these funds being held in the Central Reserve until a business case for this growth is agreed by the States Assembly.
Yes, Abdi.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I thank the Council Ministers for their comments on this proposition. And in view of the remarks made in those comments and comments by the Minister for Sustainable Development during the debate of the panel's proposed amendment to freeze alcohol duty yesterday, I regret that I need to stress that this is not a defunding proposition. Careful reading of the proposition would have revealed this to the Minister and the Council of Ministers. I also strongly refute the claims made by the Minister that his scrutiny panel had any political motivation in bringing this amendment, including an end game of not wanting to invest in the island's economy. So let's come back to what this amendment actually seeks. And let me explain why we feel we have to do this. If adopted, the proposed revenue expenditure of 650,000 for each year of the government plan 2024 to 2027 for the implementation of digital visitor economy and elite sports strategies of the economic development, tourism, sport, culture would be held within the Central Reserve until a business case for growth is agreed by the States Assembly. In order to explain why the panel has brought this proposition, I will clarify the panel's role and methodology in scrutinising the proposed expenditure, which I hope the Minister will relay to his officers to avoid future misunderstandings. The panel has had a non-political task to perform on behalf of the States Assembly. This task is not to rubber stamp proposals by the Minister that require funding and which he insists will help the economy, but to satisfy itself on behalf of the Assembly from the evidence provided to the panel that public funds are being used productively and in furtherance of public policy agreed by the States Assembly. The panel's position is that care should be given before increasing departmental heads of expenditure, noting the difficulty in reducing these once agreed. And as such, in-depth analysis should be undertaken by government to provide adequate evidence to support cases for growth and revenue expenditure and allow proper consideration prior to a decision being made. The terms of reference for the panel's review of the government plan are in the public domain. They include consideration of whether the minister's spending proposals will ensure productive service delivery that meets departmental and ministerial objectives in the context of the common strategic policy that was approved by the States Assembly, including those concerning increasing economic productivity in real terms. Those terms of review also extended to considering whether the resources allocated to revenue expenditure growth ensure value for money, demonstrate best use of public funds, and include sufficient performance indicators to measure economic growth and progress. During its review of the government plan, the panel identified this area of proposed revenue expenditure had not been evidenced adequately to merit its support at this stage. The business case for the funding combined bids to implement 3 ministerial strategies, 2 of which the panel has not seen yet, and 1 of which needs more work in order to be sufficiently meaningful, as indicated by the Jersey Sports Council in its communication to states members that extended to the elite sports strategy. The funding request is not for the development of the strategies, and the panel simply hasn't been equipped with the evidence it needs. Similarly, performance measures also are lacking. It would be irresponsible of the panel to say, "Never mind then, we'll support you having the money, Minister." The Council of Ministers' comments on the panel's amendment appears to have completely overlooked that the panel is not seeking to deprive the Economy Department of funding to be used for the delivery or the implementation of the 3 key strategies, but to have that funding held in the Central Reserve Fund until such time that robust case for growth evidence are produced for approval by the States Assembly. Producing that information is within ministers' control. There are some states members and members of the public who regard scrutiny as a waste of time. The work of the Economic and International Affairs panel is time-consuming. Much of it can seem to be taken up chasing for meaningful evidence as well as meaningful policies, with the help of our incredibly professional officers, whose persistence and expertise I can only applaud. At this stage of time, the Economics and International Affairs panel doesn't have meaningful evidence to support the funding. Our hearings on the government plan were not attended by the Assistant Minister for Sports. Questions were not adequately answered by the Minister and his officers. The panel sought to follow up unanswered questions by letter. Our written exchanges with the Minister are published on the Scrutiny website. The panel is not going to rely on undelivered promises or accept plans to make plans or wish lists as having the same value as meaningful strategies with clear content regarding delivery and costing methodology and performance measures. I can understand why the Minister may wish us to have a different approach to scrutiny. This proposition presents the States Assembly with an opportunity to override scrutiny, if it chooses to do so, which is clearly what the Minister and the Council of Ministers wishes the States Assembly to do. However, I would ask States members to be mindful of the implications. For that reason, I request members to support this proposition, so that all the strategies for which funding is sought are first delivered, along with the business cases that can be approved by States members once available. The panel remains willing to offer to States members its comments on such business cases once produced.
Is the amendment seconded? Sorry. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, Mum. Mum, I strongly urge members to reject this amendment, which ultimately would hold back vital investment in 3 key strategies within the economic portfolio. I think it's really important that members think to the comments they often hear in the media or from members of the public. Oh, another government strategy. It just gets there, it sits on the shelf. Sadly, they also say similar things about scrutiny reports. And I remember when I chaired this scrutiny panel, the same panel as the chair now chairs, I was robustly defending that. No, scrutiny reports are taken account of. We spend a lot of time diligently researching them, bringing them to fruition, consulting, and then putting out reports which matter to the States Assembly and which matter to the government. And certainly we have seen many of those reports matter. It is similar for strategies from different government departments. And whilst I cannot speak for all government departments, I can only speak for the economy department. It is clear to me that we have a really strong record of not only creating strategies in collaboration with the sectors that they affect, but in creating strategies that then deliver on everything that they say they are going to deliver. And we do see that in the rural and marine economy strategy. We do see that in the arts, culture and heritage strategies, as they are 2 separate strategies. And we will see that in the visitor economy strategy, we will see that in the digital economy strategy, and we will see that in the performance sports strategy. There is no question that the track record that the department has under my ministership is a really strong one in delivering on those strategies. Since I became minister, I set aside for the visitor economy strategy, which the industry is crying out for, and which I don't believe there has been one for years. I believe more than a decade. There hasn't been a visitor economy strategy, as I understand it. The industry has asked for one. We have sat down. One officer has been corralling this strategy, coming up with this strategy, working with the industry, an industry which is often finds it difficult to sit down together at the same time. We have, because, not for any particular reason other than because they are very busy and because they work in different areas of the visitor economy. We have sat down with them and we have worked with them throughout this year, as well as those necessary states-owned entities such as Visit Jersey and Ports of Jersey that have a direct impact on the visitor economy. And we have drafted a visitor economy strategy. It will be published at the end of this month. That sits within the delivery framework that I set. And if it has slipped, I have kept the panel up to date with that, because it is also difficult to know at the outset exactly how much work will be needed to go into it. And so the visitor economy strategy will be published very shortly. The digital economy strategy, which Deputy Curtis will speak a little more to, is in a very similar position. In that case, we didn't have the necessary officer support to be able to start writing that strategy until midway through the year. That, of course, puts back the actual publication of that strategy. And it is similar with performance sports strategy, which I know Deputy Stevenson will speak to in a bit as well, which is a vital part of Deputy Stevenson's vision for sport in this island, and it's a vision that I fundamentally support. So, Ma'am, there is no question in my mind, and I hope States members agree, that we as a department have a really strong track record of drawing up strategies that have an impact, that create a direction for various sectors of our local economy, and which then are put into action. And if anyone doubts that, please speak to people in the creative industries or the rural and marine economies who we are working with today. Ma'am, this amendment would ultimately prevent the immediate delivery of support to those industries, and it would also prevent the ability to undertake proof of concept projects to go ahead of seeking funding in future years. The modest, and I mean that in relative terms, the relatively modest amount requested in this revenue bid has been identified to address significant areas of priority for the island and kickstart the implementation of short and medium-term objectives and actions. As the scrutiny panel has noted, at the time of writing the business justification case for strategy implementation, which was back in June, all three strategies were at the time being developed in close coordination with the relevant businesses, sporting clubs and stakeholders. We have since published the performance sports strategy and will, as I said, be shortly presenting the visitor economy strategy. The digital economy strategy, I believe, will be early next year. But, Ma'am, because of the way the government plan is prepared, it is necessary to agree funding in the government plan process at an early stage. We were having those discussions back in the summer, meaning that strategies have a choice. They either go unfunded or they seek to secure funding in advance of publication. We have chosen the latter approach and sought to identify a modest amount to at least begin the delivery of actions and pilot projects in these three areas next year. This is a similar approach to that taken with the agriculture sector, as I've discussed, because that funding was initially secured in the Government Plan 2022, which was lodged in September 21, ahead of the economic framework for the rural economy being published in May 22. So this is a perfectly normal method because of the lack of synchronisation, which is no one in particular's fault, about the government plan and then the work going on in departments. They don't always synchronise. Ma'am, each of the sectors covered by these strategies have important benefits to our economy and to island life more broadly. Members will be well aware of the direct correlation between the success of our tourism offering and the availability of air links, of the strength of our hospitality sector and the vibrancy of our town centre. There is no question in my mind that the strength of our finance industry is partly born on the strength of the visitor economy. Everything in this island, the visitor economy has an impact on. We, as islanders, benefit from the restaurants, from the shops, from the cafes, from the hotels, as much as any visitor does. But we know that it is an area of the economy that has really been struggling, and that they have been asking us for a strategy, which I am delivering in literally the next few weeks before the end of this month. But to then deliver that and say, by the way, there's more bureaucracy to go through before we can get the funding, I think would speak volumes about people's perception of the government and the States Assembly and bureaucracy, and the idea that there is forever increasing bureaucracy that stops businesses performing in this island. We have been working with the Tourism Strategy Steering Group, which is made up of representatives from the industry, to develop this strategy, and the issue of confidence has come up again and again. The industry is keen to know that if, and it is a big if, they are able to invest in their product, they need direction and they need support. That direction is being delivered by us, with the island's first full visitor economy strategy for publication this month. And like I said, I believe that's the first full strategy in more than a decade. But a strategy alone cannot convey support. Building back confidence in this sector requires an effort across government, this Assembly and the wider community, and that also takes funding. And I believe that there would be no quicker way to drain confidence than to say, here is a strategy, by the way, there is more bureaucracy to go before you can access any funding for the strategy that you all believe in as a sector. So, Mum, my department is set to find an additional £1 million in value for money savings next year alone to help fund the extra support for agriculture. That is why I am feeling very protective of the budgets that I have, Mum, because there are many sectors to the island's economy. And back when we were doing the government plan, the extra £1 million that's coming out of my department to fund the extra £3 million that the States Assembly voted for is coming straight from the economy department. And so that has put immense pressure on the budgets for next year. The panel's amendments would result in a further £1.5 million in cuts to the department's budget. This is equivalent to 8% of the funding for local and digital economy next year. Put simply, ma'am, there is not much money available. The modest amount being proposed in this revenue bid is therefore intended to trial pilot schemes, prove concepts, and enable targeted support in these key areas so that we can address the immediate challenges facing the hospitality and digital sectors, as well as local performance athletes and their families. Possible actions and deliverables for each strategy were set out in the business case, which the panel has had visibility of. But until the strategies have been made public and their actions and funding requirements have been agreed with stakeholders, we are unable to provide specific, exact examples. However, in the case of the visitor economy, this funding will support the digitisation of visitor information and booking experiences, initiatives relating to the need to stimulate investment in new hotel bed stock, and funding for marketing to develop new routes or markets. As we did with agriculture, it is hoped that these short-term actions will themselves prove to be a foundation from which we can evidence small successes as we seek funding in future years. And I think there, ma'am, it's worth me taking a minute just to say about Visit Jersey, which is absolutely vital for the marketing of our island. Sir. I apologise, sir. I should look up sometimes. I think it is really important to point out to Visit Jersey, and I thank the Conotable of Grouville for a little point in the right direction there. Visit Jersey has not had any increase in its funding for a number of years. I'm really pleased that I have spoken with both the chair and the new chief executive of Visit Jersey, and they are, if I could say, at peace with the funding levels we have this year, which are effectively, in real terms, below where they were last year. And they understand, as I have put it to them, the need for us in all our areas and in all the ALOs to make every pound go further. They have to stretch their budget. In the case of Visit Jersey, they will be looking at new and innovative ways of marketing the island. They will be looking at moving away from the traditional approach that they've had. And so, sir, I really am excited about what we will see from Visit Jersey in the coming months. Sir, my assistant ministers, Deputy Curtis and Stevenson, have led on the digital economy and performance sports strategies. I will let them speak to the importance of these pieces of work in their own words, but I would like to say my own word about the performance sports strategy. During the recent debate on support for the Jersey Reds, we heard a lot about the ability of elite athletes to inspire. We heard about the need for additional funding for local sport and on the positive effect this has had on the wider community. Sir, I have watched Deputy Stevenson over the last year identify a clear gap in government support for local performance athletes who struggle to take the next step in developing their careers because they happen to have been born on an island. I've watched the Deputy develop her policy with officers, consult closely with clubs, coaches, athletes and their families, and now publish a complete strategy with a really clear goal. That strategy seeks to spend £40,000 to £50,000 next year to recruit a performance manager and improve the standard of training for local coaches, something that will benefit all of those who engage in sport. And the further £100,000 to £110,000 will directly help athletes and their families meet the costs of engaging in their sport. This will ensure that background, family circumstance and geography are no longer barriers to success for our most successful athletes. The strategy is published and we are ready to begin recruitment and the standing up of this support from next year, making a real difference to local athletes and their families. However, sir, this amendment would unnecessarily delay the implementation of this support. It would further cut into the Economy Department's budget and it would undermine that very confidence we are trying to build in all the sectors we have. Sir, I therefore urge members to reject this amendment to enable the government to get on with supporting the hospitality industry, the digital sector and local athletes during 2024 and show the confidence that the economy wants to see from this Assembly.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No, Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow my ministerial colleague, not just because he said nice things about the piece of work that I've been working on, but because it gave me a moment to take a breath, actually, after the proposer of this amendment stood up. And I'm sure she didn't mean to inadvertently mislead the Assembly, but if I heard it correctly, I think she suggested that somehow we, and me particularly, had been evasive and not wanted to appear or answer questions on this subject. So I would just like to share that we were due to have a hearing on the 20th of November with the panel, which unfortunately had to be cancelled as the Minister and Deputy Curtis were both ill. We did offer to reschedule, but the panel didn't have availability before their deadline. The panel instead sent their question plan as a letter, and we answered it in full in 2 days. And it's worth noting that since the launch of the panel's government plan review on the 10th of the 10th, I believe, we've responded to 8 letters with around 140 questions, many of which were not focused on the government plan. Of these 140 questions, none were explicitly on the performance sport strategy. There were 8 questions which covered the broader economic strategies implementation bid, which includes the funding for this strategy. So if the proposer of this amendment would like to maybe in her closing speech elaborate on her comments at the beginning about how I was somehow evasive and not wanting to appear or answer questions, then I really would appreciate that. Because I think really if we're going to speak very openly, and that's what I always committed to do when I stood for election, let's get to the point here that the panel which has brought this amendment doesn't really value any kind of investment in sport. And the deputy who proposed this may disagree, but the report, as I read it, which accompanies the amendment, makes it clear that they didn't support the creation of a sport policy officer role last year, and it doesn't support the performance sport strategy funding as set out. So I really do question the idea that this is somehow not about defunding and is about due process and doing things properly. Because really it should come as no surprise that performance sport features within this government plan. The development of the strategy was set out as a ministerial priority for 2023 over a year ago. It's been raised at scrutiny hearings since then. And as we've heard already, last month the strategy was published. And that follows consultation with many key stakeholders as well. This is all normal process, as we've heard from the Minister already. There's been no surprises from my end and from the team who've worked on this. And the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, as the critical friend that we so often hear scrutiny referred to as, has had various opportunities to engage on the matter, and I've set out some of those most recently as well. Shall I continue, sir?
Yes, I think so. I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
Anyway, please carry on.
Apologies. Approving this amendment today, as we have just heard from the Minister, would significantly delay getting what is important funding to Jersey's top athletes. And it would mean that those inequalities that, again, we've heard Deputy Morrell begin to refer to there, around access and opportunity, would continue. It would waste opportunities to raise further funds for athletes from charitable and private sources, and it would send out the wrong message that we don't value our sportsmen and women and recognise their potential to put Jersey on the map. I just want to explain a little bit more for those members who may feel that they do need some more detail. Performance athletes are role models for our community. They inspire others to succeed and lead to positive national and international exposure for Jersey. We rightly recognise sporting excellence amongst islanders, but we often forget that in many cases, our local athletes really do face an uphill battle to compete on an equal level with their UK or European and beyond counterparts. Living on an island does present challenges in terms of travel costs, availability of skilled coaches, and access to sponsorship and support networks. And this issue was particularly highlighted during the Commonwealth Games, the 2018 Commonwealth Games, where travel, hotel and entry fees for qualifying for one athlete cost around £5,000. That didn't include any of the coaching costs, equipment, fuel and other travel expenses, and obviously all of the work to get to that point and that level as well. While the fee was refunded to them 2 years later, for low-income families, this does prevent a significant barrier to even qualifying.
And a clear message taken away from the recent review of sport is the feeling that sport has been overlooked and undervalued, leaving many talented islanders feeling that a career in sport is not a viable option. National and international reviews have highlighted the importance of ensuring a safe, fair and inclusive environment for all athletes and coaches. And if we want to continue to enable high performances, we need to support our athletes. The Performance Sports Strategy seeks to enable all performance pathway athletes to thrive and achieve success by removing some of those barriers to performance sport and work towards levelling the playing field. And we've placed the needs of the athletes at the heart of the strategy to ensure that being an islander isn't a barrier to success, nor should a person's background or family circumstances prevent someone with the talent and potential from being able to thrive as a performance athlete. There is a modest sum allocated to this strategy, but it is an important base from which to build. And that's not necessarily just using government money in the future. It will be deployed to raise the standard of coaching, and that is something that will, again, as Deputy Morrell pointed out, benefit islanders across sporting disciplines, regardless of their level. It will also be used to help families with the costs associated with performance sport and off-island travel. As identified in the strategy, it's set out in there, this will be achieved with the recruitment of a performance manager. Potentially that role could be part-time, and again, we've had the Minister refer to some of the figures there. They will have the expertise in developing the performance measures for athletes to access and remain on the performance pathway. We can't do that work without that person in place. We simply don't have the resources or, dare I say it, the expertise to go into that detail at that stage. We've got one sport policy officer, and that post was created by this government in the last government plan because, in my view, previous governments had washed their hands of sport. They had created Jersey Sport and left them to it. And personally, I don't think that's good enough. So we've built back the resource of one single individual who is working really hard on those relationships, starting to rebuild government policy around sport and the kind of systems that we in this room would all expect us to have when we are holding those bodies to account around public spending and delivering on those KPIs that I know the panel are always so keen to see. So that's one individual. They cannot do everything, which is why it is so important that we have this funding at this stage to build in some of the finer detail. And I say the finer detail because there is a very clear, simple, and simple was always my intention. That was one of my clear instructions to the officer involved. It needs to be simple and it needs to be effective. We know that sport and physical activity can have hugely beneficial and positive impacts on people's lives and the communities in which they live. And sport helps to deliver many of the government's strategic priorities, which is why it is so important to me that government really starts to get back involved in this key area. So I share many of the Minister's frustrations, and I think we did hear some of those start to come out yesterday, because there's this amendment, there is another one, and I think there was one yesterday which talked to it, which really do target the Economy Department's budgets. They're not, in my view, proposals from a critical friend, as I interpret that role to be. And I certainly don't see them supporting the economy or the parts of it which we as a ministerial team are working really hard to champion and to enable. I think it's kind of ironic that in just a week or so after we've had the publication of a Barriers to Business report from an ALO, which is the subject of another amendment from this panel coming up shortly, that we're here seeking to create some more barriers to exactly the businesses trying to work over that, whether they are sport businesses, whether they are digital ones, whether they are the organisation seeking to support the businesses in our community. I therefore ask members to reject this amendment and enable the vital support to our sports organisations clubs, athletes and their families to go ahead. And I also ask that the panel, whatever the decision today, really does seek to work with ministers as we go forward on this, because we do appreciate the role of scrutiny, we do value scrutiny, and we want to work together.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. This is quite easy now. I've had two ministerial colleagues give excellent examples as to why this is going to be well-needed and well-allocated funding. And I really feel on those two arguments alone, we've done the piece, and we've only covered 2/3 of the topics. So in my area of responsibility that the Minister has delegated, I oversee the digital economy team that covers both policy and strategy. And the truth is, we've seen from strategies from the entire economic development department that the digital economy has to be a key source of growth and a key source of enabling other industries and verticals if we are to achieve the vision and aim we have for a future economy that is resilient, advanced, sustainable in 2040. We do face significant challenges, and we've heard from very tough debates already this week that the money islanders have in their purse from the productivity this island functions at decreases. Whether that be one industry, one section of the civil service, or actually the entire island, our quality of life is already not necessarily the same as we've had before. Yet we all recognise that the digitisation of many roles, when done properly, when done with a culture of enablement, of creativity and innovation, will help deliver the much needed change to ensure that we are resilient. And in writing a digital economy strategy, we have consulted widely, and we've taken our time. I've chaired countless meetings across industries, and it has not been about consulting the digital industry, so per se, because all businesses are digital businesses. And it's been exciting having members of all industries, from hospitality to startups to logistics, in the same meetings and sharing ideas, from the parishes to our ALOs, to government, to the regulators, all in the same room. But the message is clear: we need a more strategic direction, and we need leadership from government in that. It has, as I say, sir, taken longer than I would have liked us to get to where we are, and we are not at the position of publishing, because it is my view, and it is the view, I believe, of the Minister, that it is better to get this one right than it is to rush it. And the Minister has highlighted that this is indeed a chicken and egg in some cases. The risk of writing an unfunded strategy means you can't work towards the goals you set out, and you may lose traction, you may lose pace, and as dust starts to gather, the cleaning takes longer to make it deliverable. I do want to reflect, where I personally feel on this, which is which I thought about with something Deputy Reniford said earlier in one of the debates we had, which was about talking about incentives. And it was a difference between what we might want the islands to do and the realities and facts of what we find the island doing. And it's very easy to take, for example, the digital economy or the visitor economy and say, well, this is a private sector. I believe innovators can innovate. I believe businesses can digitise, and I will go off and let them do that. To do so is, in essence, to live or die by their success, and to ultimately say, should they not succeed, should they not adapt, we are on a poor course. And I would love to have been optimistic to say we could have that view, but I am coming to the view of perhaps a realist to say that sometimes one does need to intervene in industry. We know that when governments and communities rally behind their industries, when they support them, when they actually have the right culture of change, that delivers for the public purse, and that delivers for the resources that a government needs to provide to services to citizens. And we see across all areas of the industry the need for key things like data collection, data sharing, data analysis, and we hear that from state members. But we need a cohesive approach to doing that. And what I would say is we will be prudent. It is not in my nature to see us, for example, hand out money where what we need to do is support and enable alongside a business or alongside our arm's length organisations. We have had, in discussions of policy, questions as to how one incentivises, and we will find and are finding a nuanced path that works to deliver culture change, not handouts of money. So I think the Assembly have enough arguments in front of them to make this decision. I fall on the side reluctantly that it is our job in economic development to create the economy of the future, and optimism alone won't do that. Strategy and then delivery will.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. When I read this amendment, I do share a number of the frustrations that I know the chair of the panel has, and the panel have sought to try and alleviate via this amendment. However, I don't think that this is the right way to do it, and I fear it would set a precedent of agreeing specific business cases within this assembly, and the assembly's not the place to do that on the basis that there are Treasury processes, and I would also expect that departments will be following the processes set out by the Corporate Portfolio Management Office in relation to managing these particular strategies and when they made business case approvals. But I share the chair of the panel's frustrations that that's not always apparent, and that KPIs aren't always as we might like them to be. But I won't be supporting the amendment today on the basis that I think we need to deal with those issues outside of this chamber and outside of this debate. I think it's very important that the scrutiny panel is involved as those strategies come into fruition, and I also think it's important that the Public Accounts Committee is also involved, and I will put the accountable officers on notice that this is the type of thing that interests me, and I will certainly be cross-checking and cross-referencing in my role as chair of PAC that the correct processes and procedures are being followed. I think if this were to be a policy debate, and it's not a policy debate, it's not even about removing money at this particular point, it's around whether or not we should approve business cases within the States Assembly, which is something, as I said, I've disagreed with. I think if it was a policy debate around the specific strategies, I think that should be a very different amendment based on policies, and certainly not come via a scrutiny panel. So I don't think that the scrutiny panel has sought to be particularly political here. I think they're trying to solve a problem that potentially exists around the lack of information that is available to members during the government plan process. That again is something that I'd be keen to work with my other SLC members and the chair of this panel to try and alleviate and resolve for future years. But in this case, I don't think that this is the correct way to go about this, so I won't be supporting this particular amendment.
Does another member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call on Deputy Scott to respond.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Minister and the two Assistant Ministers for their contributions, as well as the Chair of the PAC. So members have heard lots of positive things about what we can expect from the visitor economy strategy and the digital economy strategy. The panel are looking forward to their publication. Basically, this is very much a timing issue. That these strategies haven't actually, they've been in the pipeline, they haven't actually arrived at a time when the panel, in time for them to be developed enough to have actual business cases that actually explained a lot, well, just enough about the costing. And it is unfortunate, I mean, this was the recommendation of the panel during the last government plan, that the business cases themselves are provided in confidence. So it's not even as if we can say to the States Assembly right now, well, look, just have a look. You're happy with them, fine. But we can't do that. They've been supplied in confidence. That's been a decision of the Minister. On the basis of saying that these contain sensitive commercial information which, again, we have sought as a panel to say, well, you know, seriously, are these numbers actually that sensitive? That there hasn't been that kind of meeting of minds there. But ultimately, and Deputy Stevenson, the Assistant Minister for Sports, I apologise if she thinks that I was suggesting that she was evasive in terms of her questioning. We've just not had the opportunity to meet with her in a hearing, and she's explained that it seems to have been that when we have proposed time, she's not been available, and vice versa. Okay, it is. But at the end of the day, we did have a business plan for the Elites sports strategy with information in it, which we sought to supplement through questioning. But we also had a briefing with sports officers in terms of the sports the overall sports review as well. It's just not really clear even how this is to be delivered by what body. An officer, okay, to develop it a bit more, but that's not implementation. It has just been incredibly difficult. I'm sorry, I do not want to be in this situation. And I'm sure that the department doesn't either. But the panel has got a responsibility. We know, I mean, for example, funding to top athletes, in what areas, how identified, how costed, just in order to be able to say to the States Assembly, okay, we've looked at this business case, we know that you can't see it, but we're satisfied. We just could not do that. And it wasn't through being awkward, it was basically, and as I think has been sort of presented, at least in the case of two of these out of three of these strategies, that they just haven't been published. The chair of the Public Accounts Committee, I thank her for appreciating what the panel wished to do and for actually appreciating that what we have tried to do is come up with a solution. We haven't actually said, don't have your funding. We've actually said, well, sorry, we are not in a position to approve this. We don't feel comfortable given the state of play of these things. So basically, it doesn't seem like you're ready to give us this information at the time that you are, then produce it to the State Assembly. It's just come too late in terms of our government plan review. So again, I'm going to continue to refute, statements like the one that the Assistant Minister for Sports has just said now, which is that the panel doesn't value sport. Yes, it's true that there was questions that the panel asked last year about the sports policy officer role, but I personally don't have recollection of the panel saying there shouldn't be one. It is perfectly entitled to ask questions, and its role is to say, is this necessary, and these things. So, and I accept that the deputy hasn't herself been on scrutiny and perhaps hasn't quite appreciated the what we try to do at scrutiny, which is just to ensure that the public, well, basically that to assure the public even, as well as the States Assembly, that money just isn't being asked for and being thrown down a bottomless pit. But I've got to say, I did find it just a little rich when the chair of PAC was saying that the States Assembly shouldn't be doing the job of the scrutiny panel. I agree, and I don't think the States Assembly should have been trying to do the job of the SEB either. What we basically have had have been rough estimates, and well, our role is to scrutinise. And it is within the Council of Ministers' power to provide information to the State Assembly. We weren't in control of the delivery plans. We didn't design them. We just respond and work with what we've got, which is produced by the Department of Economy. And as for this point that's been made, that because the panel had actually sought to fund what we were actually did believe was something that was productive, and we'd had submissions in terms of the visitor economy, in terms of having a freeze of alcohol, because we had actually sought for that funding, how dare we, from the Department of Economy itself, absent things like actually more work on the visitor economy strategy and these sort of things, that we basically aren't seeking to support the economy. I think that is incredibly unfair, and I regret that that attitude is being taken. So it's within the Council of Ministers, the Minister's power to provide information to us, to the States Assembly, that can justify additional funds being sought in terms of meaningful contribution towards increasing economic productivity and value for money. And if it cannot do this, then generally the grant shouldn't be given, or shouldn't be given that time. We came up with a solution, hold on to the money, then give this information. And the panel is not a political body. The States Assembly has the right to approve the funding in the absence of the evidence that has been sought by the panel regarding delivery of the common strategic policy and value for money. You've had promises, and you are entitled as a States Assembly to rely on those promises. We aren't. We're two people doing a panel. We can't do that. And the 650,000 a year, again, may seem de minimis to states members. You might actually say, well, it's only 650,000, go for it. That's fine. That's your decision. It's not the panel's decision. So we have come to the States Assembly. The ministers made a case. The assistant ministers have made their cases. And if you wish to basically say that's okay, you just do that we'll approve that on the basis of those promises, then really that is your decision. We just we do a job with scrutiny, we try and do that. And if you want to override it on this occasion or on any other occasion, then that is within your power and what we actually coming here are basically saying you can do. But I think that one thing that I still think, and I wish that the Minister had explained a bit more clearly to States members, was that he had described our proposal as a cut. And he basically said that this delay, would be catastrophic. And he had the opportunity to explain why. Why would it be that if the funds are in Central Reserve and these strategies are published, and then we get the information about quite how these estimates have been worked out on that basis. How many days are we talking about? How many weeks? Again, it is with his department's control. And we haven't had that explanation. And I'm sorry. So on that basis, I basically would say, in the absence of that, I would be, and I was hoping you would explain that, in the absence of that, I'd be saying, well, States members, I think in my role as a scrutineer, I'd still be saying, okay, I think I'd like you to do that. On the other hand, I do accept that the States Assembly may say, oh, never mind, 650,000, whatever. It's up to you. Okay.
You maintain the amendment?
Sorry?
You maintain the amendment?
Oh, yes, I'm maintaining the amendment, so it's just basically that...
You call for the appel?
I call for the appel, sir.
The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the 28th Amendment. If members have had the opportunity of returning to their seats, then I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 4 votes pour, 41 votes contre, no abstentions.
May we have the floor, please, sir?
Those voting pour, the Connotabs of St Brelard and St Juan, Deputy Scott and Deputy Rose Binet.
Very well. The next amendment is the 27th amendment, proposed by the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
After the words set out in Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that, in Summary Table 5.1, the head of expenditure for economic development, tourism, sport and culture should be reduced by 150,000 and the central reserve should be increased by 150,000. In paragraph L, after the words as set out in Appendix 3 to the report, insert the words, except that the revenue expenditure growth item IDFE GP 24003, Jersey Business Core Grant Funding, identified in Appendix 3, Supplementary Financial Table, should be reduced by 150,000 for each year, with these funds being held in the Central Reserve until a business case for this growth is agreed by the States Assembly.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. States members may have had a sense of deja vu regarding the funding request for Jersey Business, and so did I as chair of the Economics and International Panel. I basically, again, need to explain why the evidence was such that the panel didn't feel able to approve this funding and I'm incredibly sorry that the Minister is not in the chamber even to hear this explanation. Members will recall that I brought a proposition before the State Assembly as an independent member last year challenging an increase in annual core grant funding to Jersey Business to 1.56 million. At the time, I voiced concern regarding a poorly constructed business case within the context of the Common Strategic Policy, but the States Assembly nevertheless approved the requested increased funding. In this proposed government plan, a further 150,000 funding is being sought to further increase the core grant to Jersey Business. The panel support this proposition following the review of the evidence provided to support the bid for the additional funding, and the States Assembly remains entitled to approve the funding regardless of the reservations expressed in the panel's comment on the government plan and in the report accompanying this proposition. If this proposition is adopted again and the government plan is approved, the additional 150,000 will be transferred to Central Reserve to be held until a business case for the further increase of funding is agreed by the States Assembly. So basically, there are two hurdles for the increased funding to be overcome for the funds to be released from the Central Reserve, and that would be the supply of a business case to States members and the majority of States members approving the funding on the basis of it. Again, in an ideal world, States business would have access to the business case that's been provided in the confidence of the panel, and so would the public perhaps, but the Minister it's been provided in confidence. And the panel can only examine the evidence in the terms of its review in a context which has been in the context of the Council of Ministers' Common Strategic Policy and approved by the States Assembly. The particular point, and I think what I need to basically say here is that this could well be a recurring problem, and it's not perhaps one that is the fault of Jersey Business. I'm not sure whose fault it is. Much comes down to the fact that the panel has this job to look at value for money. The department had promised a value for money review by the end of the year, and basically that wasn't delivered. It's only been delivered in the case of Jersey Sport. So the value for money aspect does cause a problem for the panel. And that value for money, and could well do for all the arm's length organisations. The second thing is that panel has to consider the funding in the context of the common strategic policy. And the main element of that here is basically saying that the common strategic policy wants to develop an enterprise-centred strategy, identify opportunities, cut red tape, incentivise startups and help established businesses to grow and thrive. And all well and good, but basically also says that our review talks about measures. We've asked about these measures in the and how they work. The KPIs for Jersey Finance weren't reviewed, and they haven't been aligned in accordance with the common strategic policy. Now, that actually was a recommendation of the Controller and Auditor General, that the KPIs of the arm's length organisations would be aligned with the common strategic policy. Whose responsibility was that? Well, I know that the Scrutiny Liaison Committee has seen the tracker and some who's been assigned that responsibility, but let's just say I don't actually even believe that's Jersey businesses. Nevertheless, I do want to assure members, I really did not want to be in this position. Very shortly after the current CEO of Jersey Business was appointed, I met with him and explained where I could see this difficulty in terms of the common strategic policy and the KPIs of Jersey Business and the evidence that the panel received last time. I believed it was an opportunity for Jersey Business to provide some different evidence for the panel, which would have made its ability to approve the funding on the basis of evidence easier. And I do also wish to assure the States Assembly that it's not as if we wouldn't even accept that information in confidence. We did also look at the funding case for Jersey Finance, for example, and we did have some concerns there. We did ask Jersey Finance for further information, and that's in our comments too. It was supplied on a confidential basis. So again, it's 150,000. It's not really for the panel to say, well, that's okay then, all right. It's the States Assembly who can basically say, well, okay, on the basis of whatever this argument is, in the absence of, we've actually explained why we cannot connect increasing economic productivity with the information that we've been given in terms of what is to be, what's being produced by Jersey Business. It's fine to be saying, okay, there's been some cases where we believe businesses have cut costs, but that doesn't even, if you don't know if those businesses survived, if you don't know whether those businesses made profits, you can't say that this is actually furthering the common strategic policy. So in conclusion, I really would request, and I believe that this is the Council of Ministers' call, I really would request that they get on and address that particular recommendation of the Controller and Auditor General. Review those KPIs, get them aligned with the common strategic policy, and the panel members and I can have and the minister and the assistant ministers, we can have a much more productive time that is much more focused on strategies and funding that we really can see are directed towards the objectives of the common strategic policy. So basically, I leave it for the States Assembly to vote on this matter. It's a political issue for the States Assembly, and the panel basically rests its case. I call for the appel. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. Firstly, is the amendment seconded? Is the amendment seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Morell.
sir. Sorry for the delay. I was just having to get back into my computer. Sir, I urge members to reject this amendment, which would hold important funding issues for Jersey business, and would ultimately necessitate redundancies or significant reduction in support for local business. This would have both an immediate impact on the organisation's provision of expert advice and support for business in 2024, as well as long-term effects on its ability to adequately resource support its services. This investment ensures that Jersey business can continue to support the Common Strategic Policy 23 to 26 priority to develop a more sustainable, innovative, outward-facing and prosperous economy. The work that Jersey business does is very much focused around that Common Strategic Policy. As the arm's length organisation responsible for providing support to local companies, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, Jersey business is playing a vital role in helping Jersey's economy to stabilise and grow. This follows the sustained economic shocks of COVID, Brexit, the Ukraine conflict, the cost of living crisis, and ongoing recruitment pressures in the island. The combination of these impacts means that to ensure businesses are future-proofed and ready to adapt to further change, able to remain competitive and embrace new ways of working, such as automation, it is essential they are supported. This will allow them to build back better, become more resilient and able to shape their business model for growth, to become more productive or to exit safely where that is the best course of action. Jersey's business's priorities in 2024 focus on people, productivity and data insights. Their work will include piloting support for startups, programs of support for financial illiteracy, customer acquisition and retention, and developing high-performing teams, as well as support for the implementation of the 4 key strategies of export, retail, and the digital and visitor economies. So there's no question in my mind that Jersey business very much is aligned both with the Common Strategic Policy and ministerial policies. We are an island of small businesses, and many businesses are facing long-term and complex challenges which are ultimately shaping our economic environment. I know from my own experience how difficult it is to find the time to think about how you could improve productivity or resilience of your business when you're running and working full-time in that business. It can also be hard for entrepreneurs to find the expertise to navigate the process of entering the market. I've recently had meetings with a young entrepreneur who spoke to these difficulties in helping to launch her business, and she was definitely grateful for the help that Jersey business gave her. The business that she has created, I think, is incredibly innovative and will be very successful over the coming decade. This is why Jersey business's work is so important and why its advice is vital in helping local companies succeed. Sir, significant additional information has been provided to the panel by both the department and Jersey business following extensive questions, and it was disappointing to see this information largely ignored or given a negative focus. For example, as quoted in the panel's report to this amendment, since the incorporation of Jersey Business Limited, it said that there has at best been stagnation of the island's economic productivity. I would counter that statement by pointing out to members that before the formation of Jersey Business, productivity was in a significantly negative freefall. And whilst it needs to improve, it has stabilised over the period of Jersey Business's existence. And while it is a difficult task to directly connect the two, Jersey Business has not overseen a stagnation of the economy as the panel suggests. Moreover, it has played a role in supporting the island's economy to stabilise, despite the impacts of Brexit, COVID, high inflation, and so on, through their work directly with local businesses. Sir, in terms of reporting, Jersey Business uses a Net Promoter Score to measure how well it is doing. It speaks to how many businesses would recommend Jersey Business to their peers. The Net Promoter Score remains graded as excellent for 2022. So that's the customers of Jersey Business grading Jersey Business support as excellent. And it should be recognised that there was a clear difference in the type of support being provided over the last 2 years, with 2021 support schemes and crisis support featuring heavily, whilst 2022 support moved back to business as usual, and the more challenging areas that businesses must address, such as productivity, business improvement, and leadership. Importantly, Jersey Business carries out the NPS work on all programmes it rolls out, and uses this alongside customer satisfaction scores. Consistently, the Jersey Business Programme scored a Net Promoter Score of over 70 and a customer satisfaction rating of 8.3 out of 10 in 2022. Let's take a bit of water, sir. It is also important to recognise that the increase in Jersey Business's core grant does not represent an increase in overall grant funding received from government when compared to 2022. The total grant in 24, including the additional 150,000, is 10% less than the total funding received in 22 and 12.5% less than the total funding received in 21. Jersey Business has undertaken an organisational redesign and prioritisation of services in 23 to ensure best value for money, continued alignment with the Common Strategic Policy and the Strategy for Sustainable Economic Development. And its forecast expenditure for 2024 has already been reduced by just over 5% from expenditure in 2023. If this amendment was accepted, it would seriously threaten Jersey Business's ability to maintain its current staff and undermine its ability to support local businesses and future businesses. Potentially a reduction in the provision of both productivity and leadership support to businesses by 50%, or the equivalent of 5,742 hours of support for the 2,500 businesses that Jersey Business works with, or influences. Let me elucidate my argument with some facts about Jersey Business. The average saving per business that Jersey Business works with is between £25,000 and £50,000. Jersey Business wants to target 1,000 businesses in all. If they succeed in this, it would have an impact of £25 to £50 million. The business improvement programme that Jersey Business runs has so far seen 170 participants from 62 businesses take part and £400,000 saved. There have been 40 Lean Six Sigma accreditations as a result of that, and the customer satisfaction score of the business improvement programme has been 4.45 out of 5, which is excellent. In case there are members who question the effectiveness of the work that Jersey Business does, I have attended their productivity circle events and have not only seen the benefits these bring to small businesses, but have spoken to business owners about the positive impact the workshops have had on their own business processes and productivity. Even if funding was eventually found or approved, a loss of staff due to funding not being available on January the 1st would present serious damage to the organisation, as recruiting back to these roles will require time, resources, and a loss of institutional memory and relationships with businesses. This amendment, in my view, sir, goes against all efforts to increase the island's productivity by impacting the very areas of support designed to improve it and resulting in a potential loss of over £500,000 in savings made through business improvement processes. Sir, I fear the amendment has not taken into consideration the wider implications that it could have on our economy. The organisation has seen a 10% increase in general business inquiries compared to last year. I urge, therefore, the Assembly to consider the hundreds of islanders who rely on Jersey Business and what economic impact a reduction in Jersey Business support would have for the sake of the £150,000, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Beg your pardon. Colin Hellyer.
Thank you, sir. I think the Minister has said almost all that needs to be said before we move to a vote on this, but I didn't want the debate to go by without my adding my support for the work that Jersey Business does, particularly in respect of St Helier. The island's capital has withstood some severe storms in terms of its profitability and its vibrancy, and in spite of those Jeremiahs who complain sometimes that it's a ghost town and say they never go to St Helier, which is perhaps a clue to their views, it is doing incredibly well, and there can't be many other towns in Europe in the current economic situation that can boast of bidding wars for commercial premises that become empty because UK chains have collapsed. There is an incredible spirit of optimism and entrepreneurism in our island, and particularly in our capital. And I know that Jersey Business has a lot to do with fostering that, because I have been introduced to people who want to start up a business in St Helier by Jersey Business, who've asked me to talk to them about the kind of opportunities that I see for their business, whether it's retail or hospitality, in St Helier. So as far as St Helier goes, I think it would be a disaster if we sent the message out this evening that we don't value what Jersey Business does and that we want to see a cut in their operation. Now is the time when we should be really encouraging them to grow our economy and to continue to provide the kind of advice they provide to entrepreneurs who wish to start up a business in our island. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Felder.
Thank you, sir. I will keep this short because my comments are fairly similar to my comments on the previous amendment, which is that whilst I have a lot of sympathy for where the panel is coming in respect to the management of grants funding and needing to ensure that grants are managed appropriately, I do not believe that it is the role of the Assembly to be approving specific business cases for specific grants. That said, I do think that there are improvements that should be being made to our grants management processes, and I think that that would give the Assembly some comfort, and it's certainly something that I do intend to be following up as Chair of the Public Accounts Committee. And also, I would like to put on record a request to ministers to ensure that in accordance with the Public Finances Manual, any organisation that receives more than £75,000 of public funding, their accounts should be published as a report to this Assembly. And I don't believe that that is happening in all instances, and it should be. I think if that was happening, then this Assembly would have far more comfort as to where the public funding is going when it is being handled by third parties. So I won't be supporting this amendment, although I do agree with the panel that there is certainly some work to be done in this respect.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Can I close the debate and call upon Deputy Scott to respond?
Thank you, sir. And despite what people might suggest, I actually do acknowledge that there has been good work done by business, Jersey Business, and I've had positive feedback in certain areas as well. This isn't about personally attacking anybody in Jersey Business. This is about actually doing the work of scrutiny. And I totally agree with the chair of the Public Accounts Committee that in an ideal world, this would not be coming to the States Assembly. I am somewhat sorry again that yet again the Minister hasn't addressed the particular problems that the panel has identified, because it really would be nice to have some assurance that they could be addressed so we won't be here the next year. And basically, you know, we've actually do need to have a clear alignment in terms of the KPIs and the common strategic policy. Quite, you know, we just need that work. But it's also, but there's another thing that also has concerned me, because yet again, the panel has not proposed that the funding be cut. It's actually proposed that the funding is held in reserve until more information, better information in terms of business case was given, or that the States Assembly satisfy itself, even with the business case that we've had. But there is some troubling content. When you get the Council of Ministers, when you get the ministers saying, if we don't have this money now, this is going to be a problem, I think I need to just point out a couple of things. In the comments, there was something saying that if it's not given right now, Jersey Business would face the necessity of downsizing its workforce by 3 employees, or would need to reduce productivity and leadership support businesses by 50%. And these are the things to say about this. This is an amount of £150,000 out of a proposed total increased core grant of 1.7 million a year. And the amount in discussion is less than 10% of the proposed budget for next year. And that is before taking into account the reserves of Jersey Business. Jersey Business reported a surplus of 457,530 at the end of last year, with which basically became retained earnings and the strategic reserve. Now that's close to a third of its existing grant. So that in total is close to 2 million. So it's concerning if in fact what we're being told is, oh, we have to have this right now rather than give you this information because otherwise it's all going to basically collapse. And that's basically what this is just what the panel has to do. And the proposition was about the production of evidence. If the minister believes the business case is sufficient, then why would he not allow states members to have sight of it? How long would he expect that to take? I thought the threat of the loss of 3 staff was disturbing on a number of accounts. Partly because that was the number of staff that the minister told the Assembly would be lost if it didn't approve the core funding last year. And despite that information, what's in the Council Minister's comments, they actually refer to a reduced headcount in any event. I don't know how many staff got lost. I don't know why. We were told that if the funding wasn't given, there would be a loss of staff and there was a reduced headcount. That's the sort of thing that the panel, could well want to pursue, but that's, that's why we don't basically just accept statements face value. We tend to look a bit more into quite what's going on. Coming back again, when we questioned the minister, when we said, well, these performance indicators, how are they actually meant to show an actual delivery of productivity here? And I explained to the States Assembly that just saying, well, you've saved costs isn't actually the end of the story. The minister referred us to government statistical evidence, and a recent Government of Jersey's blog identified -4% growth in the island's productivity, outside that attributable to rising interest rates in the finance sector. Now, it's been highlighted that the increase in Jersey's core grant isn't an increase in grant funding received from government compared to 2022, and that's correct. But the further funding will increase the core grant provided with the annual financial statements of Jersey Business indicating a doubling of funding in a 3-year period. And all that's been set out in the comments that's been submitted by the Economics and International Affairs panel to the States Assembly. So again, we look at these performance indicators, we see that the funding has trebled over 3 years, we see that in real terms, a government blog saying that the economy, the productivity in these areas, Jersey funding business doesn't do too much in the way of Jersey in finance. That it's shrunk by -4%. In addition to that, we looked at these net promoter scores, and yeah, they're pretty good, but they have gone down. And I don't know why that is. It could be related to some of the concerns that people are aware of about the COVID payroll scheme and some advice given there, but they did go down. So again, the panel has to say, well, are you sure that this is, the best way to go about things? Because on the basis of just this information alone, we need to question this use of public money. But basically, we, as I've said, the purpose of our job is just to give the public assurance, give states as members assurance that money isn't being thrown down the bottomless pit. It is within the Council Minister's power to give the additional information, but I do again stress this thing about the KPIs and the common strategic policy and implementing this particular Controller and Auditor General's recommendation. And in that respect, I think that the Minister might look at the extent to which there are outstanding recommendations that apply to the Economics and International Affairs Department, because again, even in terms of saying this is going to affect our funding, the the controller auditor herself has said, if you don't implement these recommendations, then you're not going to get value for money. And some of these haven't been implemented. It's been surprising that when it comes to looking at the KPIs of arm's length organisations, there's even been a suggestion that that might not even be in the area of the Department of Economy, in which case that really does pose a problem in terms of the Department of Economy giving directions to bodies such as Jersey Business and others, Visit Jersey's also been mentioned, in terms of delivering policy and what it's actually asking to get in return on behalf of the public and how that informs or aligns with the common strategic strategy. So the panel's not a political body and the States Assembly has the right to approve the funding in the absence of the evidence sought regarding delivery of the common strategic policy and value for money. Again, I have mentioned that part of the Minister's delivery plan was a value of money review of arm's length organisations, which didn't take place this year. It's just been confined to a deep dive review of Jersey sport. The panel would basically be suggesting that what we would have is a business case with full costing, anticipated economic reserve. But in the meantime, the real prioritisation of Jersey's business's existing budget might not be used to actually meet the aims that you could actually demonstrate most beneficial to the economy, with the organisation exploring additional avenues for supplemental funding outside its government grant. Again, this was an area of questioning. And in this respect, the Minister might look to the Barriers of Business report that was recently published by Jersey Business, with its message that a key barrier to business and economic productivity may be government's own processes. So, don't mean to... Okay, so anyway, I basically leave it to the States Assembly to decide whether enough of a case has been made by the Minister or not to approve this funding. I'm sorry, and I have explained why the panel hasn't felt it can be in that position and has had to bring this matter to the States Assembly. I still would say based on the responses that we've had, that if the States Assembly wishes for this common strategic policy, along with scrutiny itself, to be meaningful, if it wishes for the Council of Ministers to start getting serious about delivering value for money and not just keep kicking that down the road, and the common strategic policy approved by the States Assembly, and about setting meaningful KPIs for its delivery arms in the context of that common strategic policy and aligned with it, I would urge States members to support the amendment so that maybe government would just get on with it. But I leave it to the States Assembly to make that decision, sir, and I call for the appel.
Well, the appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the 27th Amendment. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 3 votes pour, 43 votes contre, no abstentions.
May we have 3, please?
Those voting for the Colotabs of St Brelard and St Warren and Deputy Scott.
The following amendment to be debated is the 7th, lodged by Deputy Mezek, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph L. After paragraph K, insert the following new paragraph L. To agree in principle that from the year of assessment 2025, the 20% personal income tax rate should no longer be available except for high-value residents for whom no change is proposed, and personal income tax should instead be charged a rate of 25%, with all personal income taxpayers being entitled to the allowances and reliefs which are available to marginal rate taxpayers when calculating the amount of income taxable at the rate of 25%. And to direct the Minister for Treasury and Resources to bring forward the necessary legislative changes for debate by the Assembly during 2024 and redesignate the existing paragraph L as paragraph M.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. At this hour, it's extremely tempting to simply say to members I referred them to my previous speeches on the matter and then sit down. But I'm sure we can still squeeze some fun out of it, sir. If the government wants to just accept it, then of course I would do that. But I see that as unlikely. So, ultimately, I make no apologies for bringing this amendment because it is very clearly in line with the clear manifesto commitment that I and my colleagues stood on to see an income tax system which is fairer and simpler and which raises revenue which we can use to fund our public services. Putting it as simply as I possibly can for what this change will do, this change would abolish the 20 means 20 income tax calculation system and instead put every islander, except high-value residents, on the marginal relief system, and then we'd reduce the marginal rate from 26% to 25%. This would mean drastically simplifying our income tax system, and by putting so many taxpayers on the same rules, we'll be able to reduce income tax for a substantial majority of the tax-paying population of the island, whilst asking those with the highest incomes to pay a small amount more. So, in the comments to this amendment that have been lodged by the government, there's a very revealing line. It's at the top of the final page of it, where it says, "Nobody in Jersey pays more than 20% income tax on their total income in any year." But then there's a little reference that you've got to follow to the bottom, and when you read that, it says, ITIF's effective rates may exceed 20%, for example, because a person has tax arrears or because LTC is collected through the income tax system. Or to put it another way, the headline rate of tax in Jersey is not 20%, and it doesn't matter how much members of government try to say it is, it simply isn't. Because to fund some of our vital public services, they have had to introduce extra taxes and extra charges on top of that, and have done so in such a way so that it doesn't affect what they can advertise as our headline rate of 20% income tax. But the reality is that we do not have a 20% income tax rate anymore to all intents and purposes. So the government also speaks in comments to my next amendment, which of course we'll come on to, about the work that they're doing to look at other revenue-raising measures, such as the waste charge, which we recently debated, and the potential mechanism for funding healthcare, which is surely an acknowledgement that the revenue-raising measures that we have right now are inadequate. Because if they were adequate, those conversations would not need to take place. We wouldn't need to have a conversation about how we raise extra revenue for waste disposal. We wouldn't need to have extra conversations about how we raise revenue for healthcare, because the taxes we already have would be doing the job. But so they're not. And that is a simple fact that nobody can deny. So the question then becomes, since we're not raising the revenue we need for our vital public services, what can we do to try to get that revenue, and to do so in as progressive and fair a way as possible without hurting islanders who we would not want to ask to shoulder the burden any further from that. And that's where this amendment comes from. So by putting all taxpayers on the same system, that's the same system, so it's not a discriminatory system, it's about treating islanders as equals, we can raise enough revenue from the top earners in Jersey, those who whose economic conditions have not been the same as the rest of islanders for the last decade in terms of suffering from real-term wage cuts or real-term wage freezers, that section of our society in the last 10 years has done better and better, whilst the rest of us have either been doing worse off or staying the same, to ask them to contribute just a little bit more. For many of those people, that will be extremely small amounts. If you're earning millions and millions, at the very least, at the very most, it would be almost a 5% increase in income tax above that 20% rate. And if we do that, sir, we can afford to reduce the marginal rate for the vast majority of taxpayers, and we would still raise £11.5 million to fund our public services. So the distributional impact of this tax policy is that if you are somebody who is currently issued a 0% effective tax rate, you would still get a 0% effective tax rate. If you are somebody who is issued a rate between 1% and 19%, so the vast majority of taxpayers, almost all of you would see the rate applied to your taxable income, i.e. Your remaining income once tax allowances have been applied, would reduce by 1%. So that's more money in the pockets of the vast majority of islanders. In fact, sir, some people who are paying 20% now would see their income tax liability reduce because they would see themselves eligible for tax allowances that under the current two-tier system, they're not eligible for. So some of those would see themselves better off. But sir, the highest earners in Jersey, who Treasury informs me they estimate to be around 2,050 taxpayers, would see themselves paying, that's 4,750 taxpayers would see their tax liability increase. If members look at the appendices to the report for this amendment, I've put at the back of it snapshots of a few household situations to indicate who would be better off and who would be worse off. So if you're looking at, for example, a married pensioner couple, they would be no worse off under this policy until they were earning around about £200,000. So it's a pretty generous system and certainly would not be asking those who are struggling to pay more. And so for a single person, you're looking at around about £100,000 before they would be in that situation of seeing their effective rate increase. And that's the data that's been given to me by Treasury, who are, I think, best placed to do that kind of modelling. So that this policy in making our system a single-tier income tax system, in my view, meets all of the tax principles that the government allegedly signs up to, and those are the principles of low, broad, simple, and fair. So a 25% income tax rate on taxable income is still a low tax rate, certainly when compared to many nearby jurisdictions. It's broad because it applies across the board to everyone except high-value residents. And just for the record, the only reason that they're excluded is because they come under another law, and I think that ought to be dealt with on another day. It's simple, and that's obvious because one system is clearly more simple than two systems, and it's fair because it applies to everyone under the same rules, irrespective of what level their income is, and allows everybody to claim tax allowances rather than just a portion of the population. So, sir, I stand by this policy as a transparent policy about what we want to do with tax, unlike the policies of the government, where the Chief Minister, I remind you all, said in her opening speech that they don't want to raise tax, but when you look at the fine print, that is exactly what they're planning to do in the shape of some form of waste disposal tax and, I presume, a health tax, concepts on which they can give us no detail whatsoever and will not give us any guarantees that they won't implement those in a regressive way, hurting the lower income islanders proportionately more. But with this policy, we can tell you exactly who's affected by it, to what degree they're affected by it, and we can tell you that it leads to most islanders being better off overall, with the highest earners, the ones who would be focused on contributing more. But by contributing more, they would be contributing under the same rules and the same system, not excluded from that and given their own tax system for that. And so, as I said, if implemented for not for next year but the year after, it's estimated that that could start raising £11.5 million and hopefully mitigate the need to start discussing other kinds of taxes like waste taxes or health taxes to fund the stuff that we're meant to be funding from income tax anyway, as we have done for as long as anybody can remember. And so, sir, I make the amendment.
Is the amendment seconded? Yes, does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Balash.
So this amendment does have the advantage of demonstrating how much, relatively speaking, the island's tax revenues derive from a minority of taxpayers, and accordingly how potentially fragile the island's economic base is. So I'm not sure if Deputy Mezek's heart is really in this proposition. I think few policies could be so destructive to the aspirations of the Reform Party to form a government than this one. The 20% income tax rate is the foundation of Jersey's economic success. It connotes stability, and it's been in place for decades, going back to, I think, the 1920s. Around the world, people know that in Jersey, the tax rate, the income tax rate, Deputy Mezek's quite right that LTC puts it a bit above that. The income tax rate is 20%. Many people think that that is a fair rate. And because it's a fair rate, they're prepared to pay it. How would we know what would happen if a change to 25% were to take place without consultation, without any impact assessment as to the likelihood of people changing their financial arrangement so as to reduce the income which they have, which is liable to tax. The purpose of a tax system is to raise revenue. That's what it's there for. We need tax revenue in order to fund the services which the government provides. And many people will be aware that discussion in the United Kingdom over the highest rate of income tax leviable there, whether it should be 40% or 45% or 50%, has often focused upon the amount of revenue which is actually raised by these different rates of tax. And it is the case that when tax was reduced by one of the governments from 45% to 40%, the rate of revenue that was actually received increased rather than diminished. The Council of Ministers is absolutely right, sir, in its comments. This is a thoughtless and irresponsible amendment, and I shall certainly vote against it.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I rise early in this debate because this is only my second time of hearing this debate, and I'm already starting to hear the same arguments which make no sense to me already start. In response to Deputy Balash, I mean, I was under the impression that it was our 0-10 corporate tax regime which kept our economy afloat, complying with OECD and helping being as transparent and heavily regulated finance industry, rather than the personal income tax rate that people pay. And I'm going to put out a request to all members who are going to speak against this and are going to make the assertion that if we increase the tax on the wealthiest earners in our island, that they will leave. And my request is, if you're going to say they're going to leave, please can you tell me where they're going to go? Because if we talk that the people might move to another finance centre, finance industry place where they can ply their trade, saying that they might want to go to the streets of London. Well, London has an upper rate of tax, which has been frozen at the level that it is for so long that teachers are now paying the upper rate of tax. That means that they pay the base rate to a certain level. Then when they reach that level, they pay more of a percentage of earnings above that, and so on and so forth. We're not proposing reform, and Deputy Minister is not proposing this. We're proposing just to level the playing field so we're all paying the same. I think that's quite fair, it's quite simple. And I'm looking at the charts and his appendices that he supplied, and with independent taxation on the way and single people with no longer having the right to claim mortgage relief, you're looking at the first table more of how this the tax claim is going to be. And so you're looking at an individual who's going to earn more than £100,000 a year before they will be paying more tax. And sorry, if you're a single person over here earning £100,000 a year, you're probably not going to notice the really small amount that it actually increases by. So when I go again about where are people going to go, I mean, I sit in Jersey and I think we're really lucky where we live. We are no more than 5-10 minutes from home, unless you get stuck in traffic, which you might be pushed to half an hour. You're about an hour away from London by plane. Good connections to Switzerland as well. Good connections to Europe. Where are you going to go that you can have all of this, live in a beautiful place, a safe place, as well as still having a tax regime that only charges you 25%? So please, ladies and gentlemen, if you can tell me where this golden place is, please let me know. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment?
Propose the adjournment, sir.
No, we're sitting till 6 today. I think there's a reasonable
It's tempting
chance you
to
might be
carry-
defeated if you propose it at this point. Yes. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Just recently, a book written by Colin Powell, the late Colin Powell, was published. I'm particularly grateful to Dr. John Kelleher, advocate, who edited and brought Colin's words back to life. It looks back at our success over the last 60 years, how we got to where we are today, and how our economy progressed from one that was based upon agriculture and tourism, and of course a successful one it was, but how it developed and a new economy flourished. Sir Colin, of course, helped to steer governments through that time, through his excellent, incisive and intelligent advice to many politicians who sat around Policy and Resources or Council of Ministers tables. And we all owe him a debt of gratitude. But Sir, one of the words he would have used in a situation like this would have been the simple word stability, sir. Stability is key to our success, and stability is something that I'm sure this Assembly understands remains an important part of our ongoing success and prosperity. Sometimes, of course, it is difficult to live within our means, and it is very tempting to look to other ways of paying for even more stuff. But, sir, that is not the Jersey way. We are a resourceful island. We are an island that can embrace productivity, finding new ways of doing things and looking to the future whilst remaining a stable jurisdiction and one that would not take a step like this without some considerable consultation with the public, with the business world, and some very careful thought indeed. Of course, so-called simple changes often come with unintended consequences. And whilst I hear the arguments of the Deputy, I think it's also important to remind members that this change, if it was implemented, and I'm sure that the Assembly will assist me and the Council of Ministers in maintaining our reputation for being a strong and stable jurisdiction by voting against this amendment. But it is, of course, important to state for the record that standard rate taxpayers, who are the top 10% of earners, would, of course, under this amendment, if it were to pass, face a 5% increase in their taxation. Those top 10% of earners contribute 45% of our income tax revenue, and many of them are internationally mobile. The amendment, therefore, would ask them to pay an additional £23.5 million. We have talked earlier today about the importance of tackling inflation, the importance of finding a way through these difficult economic times, sir, and taking money out of the pockets of people who are investing and spending in our local economy is not the right time to be doing that, sir. I would ask members to remember the important word of stability, stick to our values, long-held values as an island, and reject this amendment.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It seems we're playing games at the end of the evening as to who can get the last word in before we take a break. But nonetheless, I'm in the ring. So, and what I'd like to do first of all is just concentrate on two statements in the comments paper submitted by the ministers. And the first comes on page 1, convenient. This proposal is part of the Reform Jersey Manifesto. And it is similar to amendments that have been unsuccessful in recent years. So for a number of years, I think this is the third time we've brought something like this, our tax policy, to this body. So there's been plenty of time to have a look at it in depth to see what the economic and fiscal consequences might be. There's been plenty of time because we've had this for the last... Thank you, sir. We've had this for at least 3 times. So you've had years of knowing what our policy is to analyse it, and yet it says in the conclusion on page 2, it would be simply irresponsible to impose these changes without careful consideration of the longer-term economic impacts. So we've had plenty of time to study this. We could tell you exactly what the impact is, but we haven't done it. And it would be totally irresponsible to bring it without us having done it. Why has it not been done? Our policy isn't going to change. It's principled. It obeys the 4 statements of being fair and equal. It works, we believe. It's up to the ministers, I think, to prove, and let's see it here and now, what are the predicted economic or fiscal consequences of adopting this policy? You've had 6 years to study it. Tell us. Do tell us. And we'll that way we'll be going somewhere. We are reminded by the Chief Minister equally to concentrate on the word stability. And she then went on to quote how productive our economy is. The fact is, however, that our productivity rate has shown zero growth over the past 20 years. It's flatlined, 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 and stayed even flatter lined over 20 years. That's a pretty significant absence of any productivity. That doesn't recommend our economy now. It does quite the opposite. Because whatever we're doing, it's not working properly. So, yeah, I asked for the challenge to somebody, the Treasury Minister, it's bound to be, to tell us what these horrible financial implications might be from adopting this tax. And while he's up on his feet, to say why, in the last 6 years, he's not investigated it, so he can definitely say one way or the other. And it's only speculation now.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you very much, sir. Of course, members are fully aware that I am a Social Democrat, so I am centre-left politically. Probably more New Labour, so I'm a bit different compared to Reform Jersey. However, I do agree with the principle of increasing personal income tax, and hence the reason why I will be supporting this proposition. It has always been very much something that I've been aware of, looking at jurisdictions between 1945 all the way through to about 1980, and we saw this social democratic model, and we saw the tax model change, we saw governments invest, we saw investment in human capital, and we saw economies enhance their productivity levels. Now, the opposite to that is with jurisdictions that have low taxation, they don't tend to invest in human capital, and therefore, as a consequence, we don't really see high levels of economic productivity. And because we've got this supply-side model in, say, like the US, for instance, where we saw Ronald Reagan come into power, and he was very much neoliberal, he decreased the top personal income tax rate from about 70% down to 28%, and now you just need to look at the state of the US's affairs and look at the middle classes in the US as well. And we can also say the same with the UK as well. When Margaret Thatcher, when she took office, we saw the middle classes and the lower classes really be impacted due to the austerity measures that were in place. And we really have to come back to Jersey here, sir, because I think that's really where the amendment is relevant, sir. But, you know, a low tax rate of 20%, what it will do is it will allow surpluses to accumulate. And really the incentive to invest when wealth growth is seen is going to be discouraged, because people are going to be seeing a positive net wealth position. And that's going to be further increased in Jersey, say, compared to the UK, where, you know, the top personal income tax rate is about 45%. So if somebody was to take a decision, do they live in Jersey or do they live in the UK, it would be preferable for them to live here, because they'd be better off from a positive net wealth position. And they could allow themselves to have their investment returns to accumulate, and they'd get richer and richer and richer. But I think all Deputy Mezek is asking here is for the Assembly to say, well, look, let's just try and increase personal income tax on those who are the high earners from 20% up to 25%. And also, he is saying as well, with the 90% of marginal income taxpayers, they will see a slight reduction in their tax, because it will be going down to 25% on the marginal income tax rate instead of it being applied at 26%. So what this means is essentially people will have slightly more money in their pockets. It will give them, you know, some more disposable income, or even to increase their level of savings as well. And I think that also has to be something we need to consider. Now, okay, it could maybe be countered. Is it maybe an appropriate time where we say, well, let's just maybe reduce the marginal income tax rate to 25%? Is that maybe going to have inflationary impacts within the economy, I don't really see how there would be much difference. I think there might be, say, subtle effects on prices, but not much. And that's why I think it would be certainly a very worthwhile amendment to be supporting, sir. Now, I would just like to turn members' attention to a quote that featured in the Skills Development Fund proposition that is very much relative to this debate, because it goes on about wealthy individuals and the desire to invest in economies. So, sir, the quote goes, "If in a potentially wealth community, the inducement to invest is weak, then in spite of its potential wealth, the working of the principle of effective demand will compel it to reduce its actual output until, in spite of its personal wealth, it has become so poor that its surplus over its consumption is sufficiently diminished to correspond to the weakness of the inducement to invest. But worst still, not only is the marginal propensity to consume weaker in a wealthy community, but owing to its accumulation of capital being already larger, the opportunities for further investment are less attractive unless the rate of interest falls at a sufficiently rapid rate." Now, I think that is a very pertinent point, because I think what's being made here is there will be low levels of investment in economies where there is a low level of taxation. But where you see, say, there's a balance between higher tax rates being applied, and also the government will be in a position where they're most likely to be spending more on the economy, they're more likely to be spending on people as well. So what that will then induce is more demand overall in the economy, and that would also benefit in terms of the island's economic productivity levels. But I think what we are seeing here is the same argument about it's all about Jersey's financial stability. Well, yes, okay, fine, we are a stable jurisdiction, but we just need to look at the state of our economy and look, low taxation has been applied here for decades. And look, are we in a good position? Perhaps, yes, our reserves are, but the economy is not performing that well at all. And I think we have to be very honest about that. And the reason partly is due to the government not investing in people. And in order to invest in people, you need to be generating as much revenue as you can. And unfortunately, I think the government has missed out on several opportunities where they could have been applying taxes on those who've got broader shoulders in our community. And unfortunately, that's not happened. And as a consequence, I think we have been one of the standout jurisdictions that comes to mind in, when it comes down to, say, political scientists who look at Jersey, and I think they can say, well, the economy might have strong reserves, but in terms of its economic performance, it's not performing as well as it could. And it's been, demonstrated when you look at the Scandinavian countries, they've got higher taxes, but the government's investing in the economy. And you just need to look at the performance of their economy. And I think there is definitely a relationship between low taxation and low levels of economic productivity. So I think I've made my point pertinent enough, and I hope members will support this amendment.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I was just looking at some of the figures in this proposition, and one of the things it says is only 4,750 taxpayers would see their tax liability increase. And how many taxpayers are there in Jersey? I was doing some work with the income tax department not so long ago, and that's 14,100. So if you've actually put that as a percentage of population of 110,000, basically 12.7% of the population pay tax. Or you could put it another way. I'm just using the figures that I've been given. 87.3% of the population don't pay tax. I mean, an awful lot of people are carrying other people who are not paying tax. I mean, just think about those figures, because I think it really is good to look at these figures. So basically now you've got 14,100 taxpayers, and if 7,050 are going to see tax liability, that's a third of them. So basically, 87.3% of the population don't pay tax, and then the remaining 12.7%, a third of them you're going to get to pay more tax. And then we've had some sort of discussion about economies and things, and you sort of think, well, who are the people really kind of like perhaps trying to produce money here? I suspect it could well be that, you know, amongst that remaining percentage. So I can't, I mean, I'm actually all in favour of pushing up tax allowances to some extent to cover things like rent, actually. But I can't see that this system is targeting, you know, in the right way, whilst the people that we really, you know, feel. And then the real point is that marginal relief itself, and in terms of the 2020, sitting at quite a high level already. It's a really enormous amount of people who actually don't pay the 20%. So, yeah, at the end of the day, well, I don't know. I would have liked to have been able to see a much more better worked model in order to be able to feel confident that this will help some of the people who I would like to see help, particularly those who are actually paying income tax at a marginal rate and actually a very high amount of rent as well.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I think this might be the first time I've spoken on this, even from the previous ones, because I've learned a lot about tax in the last few years, thanks to the coaching from Deputy Alves, who seems to know her way around the tax system. In fact, if you want your tax done, sir, she's really good at it. She explains it so well. She should have been a maths teacher. She really should. She's not sat here, so I know she's not looking at me. I think there's an issue. The issue around this is, first of all, the immediate dismissal from some. We can't even contemplate any changes for these reasons. It's been a long, long time, and somebody came up with an idea a long time ago, which was a good idea at the time, etc. I get that. We've heard that so many times. But society changes, and this island's changed. And what we are starting to see is some real societal problems now. And this massive inequality that is growing and growing and growing, if we don't do something about it, we have got a real existential problem for our society in the longer term. Young people are leaving. People aren't staying here when they should be. They are economically as productive as they could be. We talk about productivity all the time, although I've got to say, I'd like to see a clearer definition of productivity in a number of different industries, because we talk about productivity in the public service, and sometimes I don't think people are really sure as to what they're actually discussing when we talk about that. And we need to start to think about what we want as a society, and what we want people to contribute. Now let's look at the figures, and I urge people to look just for once at the actual report that goes with this piece of work, rather than dismissing it out of hand, and look at the graphs. And they are graphs because they're labelled and there's a line, and they are line graphs because there's a value between each of the values. That's very good. Well done, Deputy Mezek. Marvellous graph. Do like a graph. And it shows, and I just went through, and the reason I said a good graph so is because I can interpret them and write down numbers from them, which is great. So if you're a single person, you have to, as was mentioned, I had it starting at around £98,000, probably around 100. Yes, the scale could be better. £100,000 before you see a minimal 0.01% increase in your tax. My screen's just gone off, sir. I was going to talk about more, but never mind. There we go. And it's only when you get up to, and then the graph stops, £273,000 that your tax is increasing by 0.03%. So let's look at the actual numbers here. Let's not talk about this mythological exodus from the island of the wealthiest who pay tax. Well, I don't want to live here anymore because I'm paying an extra 1 or 2 or 3% tax. Forget all the safety. forget the access, forget my contribution to the island because I feel part of something. No, I'm going to leave all of that and I'm going to re-establish my family and my background somewhere else in the world, which we can't name. We can't name where it will be. No, an island somewhere that doesn't have the infrastructure that we do, or access to Europe, or the health structure, a health system that we're trying to do. One day, sir, we might be able to offer a new hospital for people. So imagine that, sir. Imagine. What a wonderful world that will be. We might have a whole new facility for people. And it is those societal issues, those societal features which are so important in attracting and keeping people on this island. Because if you are wealthy and you think, actually, there was a payoff here. My family is safe, the schools are good, the healthcare is good, access is good. I can go skiing, I can get my private jet here, I can drive my car. I'm not going to be mugged in the street. There are good places to eat. And I've got to say so, every time I go off to England, for example, the restaurants and so on here, we're so spoiled. And we really are. And that's a genuine comment. It's not a facetious comment. I mean it. And it is those subtle features of what this island is about that makes it so attractive to people. And we mustn't forget those in this debate. And as for this doing damage to Reform Jersey, I would say the opposite. Because when you look at the actual numbers, and let's look at some more, married couple with 2 children would have to earn up to £259,000 with still no increase. I would suggest, sir, that my colleagues and my party have a connection with those people, not just the ones who earn hugely above that. And we would have a connection with those people too, and I would be quite happy to sit and explain to them why I think actually you can afford to contribute a little bit more to our society because of the benefits you get from being here. And taxation is the deal that we have with a civilised society. We rely so much on so many things. Our police force to keep us safe, our hospitals to keep us well, to protect us, our education system, the roads to work, our bins to be connected, the sewage system to work, all of these things, that comes through taxation. And we need to pay for it. And so what we do have are an increasing number of stealth taxes. GST, a regressive tax, a waste charge. And I'll stand here, sir, and put on Hansard a prediction that we will have a regressive tax on our waste within 5 or 10 years on this island. Perhaps even sooner if some people get their way. And those taxes affect everybody. But they are obviously designed to not affect the wealthiest as much as those at the bottom because perhaps, and I hope not, they're more important to us. I'm not so sure about whether our society is that important. I see Deputy Ferry nodding. Actually, the people in my constituency are really, really important to me, not just the wealthiest. And if we judged our society on the way that we protected everybody in our society and how the standard of living for those at the lowest income was and how protected and safe and supported they felt, that would be a much better society. So let's look at some more. Married people with pensions, £196,000 before you pay any more tax. And then, and this is a really important point, and perhaps it's a point I will criticise Deputy Mezek here. Perhaps he hasn't made it well enough before. If you look at the fact, sir, which is it's a graduated scale from there. It isn't a sudden massive increase. And this is what we're getting in this argument every single time. It's chicken licking politics. The sky will fall in if we do this. Suddenly everyone will be paying so much tax it'll all disappear off to, I don't know where, London? Probably not. Guernsey? Be careful what I say now, sir. I don't want to start a diplomatic incident. Well done. Yeah, they've got, well, I don't know who their chief minister is. Well, actually we do. But anyway, where? And that is such a good question from Deputy Coles. Because if you are going to dismiss, which is what some are doing, you've got to have very good reason to. Not just this mythological, oh, we've always done it this way. We've always done it this way and it works. But it's not working as well as perhaps it did one day. with the changes in the world economy, with Brexit, with our place in the world changing, with changes to the finance industry, with the shift from taxation to companies to individuals, particularly those who are middle and lower incomes, it has changed the experience of living in Jersey. And I actually think that a majority of people on this island, if they really looked at this and what this change would mean, would say, yes, it's about time we evened up our tax system. And I would suggest that the tax office themselves would find it a lot easier to have one system to regulate, well, that and the 11K. And by the way, the really wealthy people that you really do want to attract, I know, there's a real passion within council ministers to get the wealthiest people to buy the most expensive places. They've still got the 11K system going, or whatever it's called now. 21E system. I've never quite understood why that name changed. And so you are better off with this system. You are better off and paying less tax between £42,000 and £196,000 for a married couple in a pension. You are better off. You are better off with a married couple with two children from £56,000 up to £259,000. You are better off. You are paying less tax. Surely, sir, the Conservatives in this would like to say, let's pay less tax. It's a good thing, isn't it, for you? And finally, if you're single, between £21,000 and £98,000, you are better off with this system of taxation. And I ask members, as they go tonight, to go home and have a bit of bedtime read and read the report. Read the actual impact of this, not the myth that we keep getting every time we debate it. Because I stood on a platform with this tax system because I believe it's actually a real step forward to even up what people are, make a lot more people that bit better off so they get more money in their pocket to spend in our economy. And this is the other feature, sir, and the reality is those at the lower incomes tend to spend more locally. They spend more proportion of their incomes locally in our local economy. So everything, every tiny step we take to give a little bit more money there works. And that mobility we talk about at the very highest end of our income streams, that may well not be spent here. There was arguments about prices being pushed up of homes, prices being pushed up with all sorts of things there. You're right, let's have a look at it. And Deputy Southern was right, you've had plenty of time. And I think the real shame is that this is not being considered properly. This is not being looked at for the actual impact of what we want to try to do here. Instead, we're getting the same old, tired, dated, and out-of-place argument that everyone will leave the island with the money, with their money, go somewhere else, and we'll have nothing left. Sir, I'm afraid that is not a valid, and I mean valid in a real term of the word validity in any piece of study. It's not realistic, and there is no actual explanation of where people would go. So I say to people, let's say it publicly. Yeah, if people, I know we can't listen on the radio anymore, which is a shame, but we might be able to listen back. If you are single, between 21,000 and 98,000, you'll be better off with our tax system. If you're a married couple with up to 2 children, with our tax system, you'll be better off between 56,000 and 259,000. If you're a married pensioner, you'll be better off with our system between 42,000 and 196,000. That, sir, I think, is a way forward for this Assembly, an intelligent, thoughtful, considered way for the main population of Jersey, of taxpayers. And I urge people to really think this through before you dismiss. Thank you, sir.
Is the gentleman proposed? Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, indeed, Deputy Hagro, yes.
Obviously, members agreed that we would we'd shorten our lunch hours tomorrow and Friday, and that we would stay till 6 tomorrow. But I would just like to feed into people's minds, sir, that potentially, depending on how tomorrow goes, that we could potentially stay to 7:38. But I'll just leave that with members overnight so that they can at least consider this. Thank you, sir.
You mean you may make a proposition for us to sit even later than 6 tomorrow?
Yes, if people would actually consider that, and think about it so we could do that in the morning. Thank you, sir.
Perhaps you could take a poll of members in the morning and we'll know.
Thank you, sir.
Also just remind members that at 12:45 there's the photograph. So I don't know how much time members wish to spend having their makeup put on and hairs done, but just let you know. Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow.